Attendees, chat. So yeah, are you guys ready for me to hit go?
Yeah.
Yes. Right, we're on. Novel, but yeah. All right. Oh, guys are chatting away already. Hi, Sean, Chris.
Right, is everybody ready for this 9-hour megathon? No, I'm joking.
Hi, David. Hi, Terry. Yeah, so some of you may not have caught the last minute message. Obviously, Dan has not been available for this, but we have with us Mr. Richard Townsend from Napit or Napit. Sorry, is it Napit, like the horse?
Well, apparently you're supposed to say Napit. Apparently, you get chastised if you call it Napit.
I remember you saying it on a webinar once, and I was like, right, I must remember the nay, and I keep going Napit.
I always call you Napit.
Napit.
I don't think it's a
He doesn't prejudice.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah. So for everyone watching, Dan, yeah, he's family availability, so he hasn't been able to attend. So we thought we'd get someone far more good looking than Dan Jackson. So we've got Gandalf the Grey of Napit, Mr. Richard Townsend. So thanks for joining us, Richard, at very last minute notice.
It was actually. It was
literally. We put a tweet out like an hour ago. It's going, Richard's with us.
Right, so Paul, do you want to kind of introduce this, and we'll just jump straight into it, shall we?
Oh, I'm steering again. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
great,
you got the thing, mate. You're at the helm.
Okay. So, welcome everybody. This is number 2. I promise you this will be shorter as long as Sean in the comments doesn't ask 1,000 questions. We've kind of done most of the introductory stuff in our last one, which covered domestic. So if you want to see the kind of crux of what we're doing and why we're doing it, if you could just go back and watch the first few minutes. Basically, my computer's not working straight away, as per usual on these live webinars. For those of you who are of an age who remember the 16th edition, there used to be 4 codes, C1, C2, C3, C4. C1 was a requires urgent attention. How urgent was in the eye of the beholder. C2 required improvement, based on whose opinion. C3 required further investigation. Okay, so is it urgent or isn't it? And then 4 was does not comply with 7671, amended to whatever the addition was. So it confused a hell of a lot of people. I think it's fair to say the reports were massive with C4s, and then it was down to the eye of the inspector, and it just there was a very thin line between them codes. I mean, what was your view of them, Richard, when they first came out, or when they were removed?
Well, I was coding leisure centres and domestic properties for estate agents, with all of these, and it was just a nightmare because C4 could be green and yellow sleeving and crap.
That was always coming up though. No green and yellow C4. Yeah, this stupid little thing.
There's no green and sleeving. There's no green and yellow sleeving in this property. It hasn't been in for 30 years. It's a death trap. Well, it's fine. Get on with life.
So there's no green and yellow sleeving. Surely it's a C1.
Playing devil's advocate. Yeah, it was difficult. And then you've got there was a mythical tot-up scheme, if you remember, where some contractors would say, well, if you've got enough C3, you could top that up and it'd be a C2 overall. Or if you've got a couple of C2s, you could top that up to a C1. Or if you've got lots and lots of C2s, but you've got loads and loads of C2s, you could class that as a tot-up and go to C1 in failure isolation. So I could never understand that. It was either failed or it was passed. There's loads of required improvements, and believe me, I found lots of that stuff. But it was difficult.
Right, yeah, it was. It was a pain in the backside.
I prefer the new system.
Came out.
The system's clearer.
And these are the codes we know, and I find them far better than the old coding system. Danger present, C1, risk immediate, as you lovingly put it, Richard. I can see it, I can touch it, it will kill me now, which is a great way of explaining it. C2, potentially dangerous, urgent remedial action required. I always like to look at that as one instant, one thing needs to happen for it to then become a C1, which for me, in my mind, works. It's a nice way of doing it. C3 covers that range of, yeah, it's sleeved, but it's not green and yellow, and there's a label missing here, or little snagging bits. And then FI, I always looked at it as the, I'm time constraint. I know we got a lot of negative feedback last week by certain individuals, so hello if you're watching, because I was a bit FI happy, but naturally my brain has used this to work from the bottom up because of my engineering judgment, my assessment of risk. As I'm trying to consider all the variables, I would naturally start, okay, I need to think about this, investigate this in my brain, maybe investigate the installation more, but everything is about your scope, your extent and limitations of your EICR. On commercial, it's far, far more controversial on commercial installations because you have, and let's be honest about it, an unintelligent client a lot of the time. You have many, many clients a lot of the time. You will have faceless clients a lot of the time. You may be working as a subcontractor for an agent or a facilities management organization who can be, and I'm being kind, nightmares to deal with. Yeah. Because you may be dealing with admin. They may ask you for fixed price. They may ask you for lump sum. They may ask you for a day rate. There are so many variables in commercial, and unlike in a domestic house where you have a reasonable level of control and access and a confined installation, your installations can be 50, 100 times bigger than a domestic one. You can have thousands of circuits in a commercial installation. You know, I mean, you just go to like Westfield shopping centre, commercial installation. How many tens of thousands of circuits there? How do you divide that installation up? How do you ascertain and verify that that installation is fit for continued use in part or in the whole? And where do your responsibilities start and stop? So these are things that domestics kind of maybe don't think about sometimes.
No, but with domestics, the agenda is always the same in that the client is really intending on the assumption or the want that the result will be satisfactory the majority of the time.
Yeah, they do. They want satisfactory.
You know, the outcome is wanted. And for me, as Richard said, I mean, I much prefer these codes because they are fairly. I mean, we saying that last week we were going for a few options because we were always coming from different angles of opinion and judgment. But the conclusion is the same. Is it dangerous? Is it potentially dangerous? Could it be improved? Great. I think the issue for me with these is because we have this understanding that, you know, the client kind of wants it to be satisfactory. If we start having codes that are going to be immediately concluding in unsatisfactory, it starts to manipulate people's judgment. So we're going to cover this 522 one, this infamous one about cables buried in the wall. But fundamentally, if it is potentially dangerous, as BS 7671 requires, it's a C2, but that C2 is unsatisfactory, and that's the problem. So I've said this before on podcasts and webinars where the problem is, I think that the codes are great to use, but the conclusion with when they're used with the satisfactory, unsatisfactory, it actually ties your hands. It doesn't give you the freedom to judge it yourself.
Yeah, I do think
whenever anyone asks, or whenever we do presentations for this, loads of electives, we always start off as it's not a rule book, you know, it's not you must do this. Never ever said that. No. We've always said we've got to start somewhere. We had to take a line in the sand and say, well, two different installations, two different clients could have the same fault viewed differently based around the circumstances of that client. So we had to take a view and say, well, let's go here, and that's how we code that. So yeah, we find some of our stuff is harshly coded because we've taken that it's an ordinary person and we have to protect them. Another organisation, another installation, another person will say, well, do you know what? I've got blocks. I only let the maintenance guys in. So what would be a C2 somewhere else? Be C3.
But do you think that now and then there might be some electricians that are maybe trying to go to C3 because they don't want to give the unsatisfactory sometimes? Do you think sometimes they're kind of...
Because people will always try to please someone. That's human nature.
Yeah, indeed.
To please while we're working and we keep the boss happy and all that sort of thing. And as an electrician or a jobbing electrician or a contractor, you're really unlucky because if you work on 10 different jobs in a week, you've essentially going to have 10 different bosses that you've got to keep happy. They'll have a different agenda, each installation and each place will have a different outcome, a different recommendation, different risk assessments, control monitors in place to ensure people are safe. Because that's a big one in the commercial environment. A savvy facilities manager will say, well, you give me C1s and C2s for that. Can't afford that just now. So what we'll do is I'll put a lock on that and do a risk assessment and safe system of work and stop anyone around that. And young people can go near it, maintenance guys, and they'll have to be warned and sign a log saying that they've been told that there's some stuff in there they shouldn't be touching and be aware of it. And then we'll put it on the maintenance schedule. So that's how commercial people will get around things, and they're entitled to do that. It's their business, you know. They've got a cash flow to deal with. When you're talking in the domestic scenario, it's slightly different. PRS is again slightly different. A PRS property is a property, but it's not really a property. It's a commercial venture. If a property is being rented out, it ceases to become a dwelling. It's a dwelling in its name, but it's a commercial entity. So the people inside have got more far-reaching requirements to discharge their health and safety.
So just to be clear, Richard, so if I rent out my house, that is then technically a commercial venture.
I would see that, because you're receiving funds for it, so you're in business.
I'd never thought of it in that context, but you're right, I suppose.
So fundamentally, you're providing something, you're providing an asset for income, and that's got to be a safe asset. Yeah,
and then, so therefore, you've got to look at, so when someone says, oh, satisfaction mate, okay, all C3s. C3 is improvement recommended. Well, that means something very different if I'm going to test your house that you live in. Improvement recommended, which has been around, it's eating this out. I believe that for 20 years, who cares? When you're a client, and that new PRS legislation says that the landlord is responsible for the safety of the tenant throughout the tenancy, whatever. So if they've got a C3 improvement recommended, and they don't do anything about it, and they leave it, and something happens to that tenant, that's going to have a big investigation, and the judge or whoever, or prosecuting QC, whatever, is going to say, so, Mr. Landlord, an expert in their field came along and did an assessment of your property electrically and said that some improvements were recommended in this area.
Yep.
That's correct. And they were based around the latest wine regulations, which are there for safety, blah, blah, blah. Yes, that's correct. Did you carry out those recommendations? No, I didn't. Right, someone's died. You were told by an expert that an improvement was recommended and you didn't do it. Yes, that's correct. At that point, you're stuffed.
Yep.
Because it's a commercial venture. You have a different set of health and safety requirements to keep people safe in your property.
So just on that, Richard, sorry, just if I can quickly intervene, because I don't want to spend too long waffling on. We've got a lot of pictures to code. This book here, which we mentioned in the last one, that's the guidance on risk. For anyone who watched last week or didn't, number 3 says comply with legislation. They're probably still watching it. Comply with legislation and codes, but be prepared to seek further improvements. In a commercial venture, a lot of what Richard has said is absolutely correct. In a commercial venture, you will meet lots and lots of people who only want satisfactory. There's some bad eggs out there. For me, you have to approach the client in very much a Janet and John approach. I am a client. So for me, I understand if I get an EICR with C1, C2s, my C1s better get done very quickly. Same as C2s, but I still put C3s in. I have to do something. A duty of care has been placed on me. Yes, I can put interim control measures, which can be something as simple as locking the doors, putting out briefings, ensuring only my maintainers are briefed, etc., while that is being costed, because some C3s may end up, you need to replace this switch room because it's life expired switch gear. And then I will look at the maintenance and I will look at other legislation. The one thing that I found commercially, an electrical installation, there is more opportunity for a contractor, because in a domestic world, you're within the within the constraints of the homeowner and how much money they have. Within the commercial market, you have an opportunity to clearly communicate and discharge a duty of care. And this is what I say to all my contractors, if you tie it into a legislative obligation, i.e. electricity at work regulation, and include that in your reporting, you're being far more concise. and eventually you may give it to a facilities manager. But I always say, if you're doing something like that, copy in whoever's responsible for safety for that building, and you guarantee your report will get taken a lot more seriously. And this is one of the invisible walls that a lot of contractors don't think about doing. When you're doing any pre-start or pre-contract, get the details of the safety professional. When you issue your final report, issue it to them. Guarantee you will get a little bit further than you may have previously got before. But moving on to a bit of controversy, because we do like a bit. Obviously, as you said rightly, the judge always, this is what everyone argues with. But in commercial, it's more about the duty of care of the client and how much the contractor has discharged that duty of care versus how bad is a client. And that's one of the things. The contractor, regardless how bad a client is, they need to make sure that they have taken all reasonable steps to inform the client, even if the client is a bit of a tool. There's that risk book. I'm not going to cover that anymore. Now let's get into this, because there's a book called Code Breakers, which is right here. And you guys published it. We had some input into it, which it's a decent book. It's something that you can use that's handy if you're doing coding and you're trying to remind yourself or get some ideas and just realign your thought process, because sometimes we have bad days. But there's also a book published by Electrical Safety First, and I'm just gonna kind of address some of the elephants in the room. It's on issue 5, so this has been amended 5 times to get to the current edition. This is only the 2nd edition of the Code Breaker, and it's fair to say from 1 to 2, the main thing was the volume of codes, plus the additional information that grew, didn't it? It pretty much tripled in size.
Supportive information there. There's there's a lot of information in there.
So these 2 books exist at the moment, and we would be kidding ourselves if we didn't say on social media there's a lot of people debating and arguing certain parts of the codes. In our last one, we briefly touched on it.
Again, as Richard's just pointed out, a lot of people use these resources for answers instead of kind of helping them. They just go, what is it? It's that. And, the books are really written to support or to give, that angle.
And to verify your assumption.
Yeah, but they're not there to make your decisions for you. And I think a lot of this is the thing. This is why a lot of people kind of, don't feel. I mean, a lot of people probably don't know what other information is in the Code Breaker.
In fairness if I remember the thought processes that I had when I was developing my inspection and testing knowledge, I didn't have resource like this. So for me, it was, if I was doing an EICR report, I might go home, pick up the regs book, and I'd skim through and look at a chapter and go, that actually chapter was relevant to what I was doing.
When I started doing like full-on testing all the time, I had Guidance Notes 3, I had the NICIC inspections, but they never did anything specifically on the coding, if I remember. They did testing processes. Yeah, but they did psych on filling in the forms, but it wasn't really about inspections or coding or anything like that. They didn't do anything.
Well, I used the wiring rigs book because it helped me learn the content and where to access it quicker. But what I found with these was I ended up almost doing something similar to this, where if you had common regs that were always breached, you'd write them down, you'd put them on a sheet of, these are the most commonly breached regs. And when I saw Code Breaker, I just thought something that the really good testers and inspector and testers would do just for their own reference paperwork. And it was that quick reference guide to, what's that reg number again? Oh, yeah.
But the flip side to that, there's a flip side to that, because obviously I was a QS for a local authority. You get the guys who will have their 6 or their 7 codes that they always put out there, the observations they look for, and they look for those ones, and there are many observations they don't actually even reach to because they're not regular, they're not the norm. And so someone will come up with their hit list, their top ones, the ones that might have certain remedial works. But I'd go and do a follow-up, and I'd find things. I remember finding on one property outside in the porchway, there was an exposed MI cable that was still energized. Where a luminaire had fallen, didn't pick it up at all. So I don't normally look out there. When I asked him, I was like, well, because when people do this a lot, they can fall into a rotation, a pattern, especially when they have to do them, many very quickly.
So just looking at the comments, Mr. Stanners, whoever he is, his comment was the last one was way too long. And yeah, do you know what? We kind of let time drift by. We were having fun, we were enjoying it, and we were engaging everyone. If people's complaint here is too long, I think we need to look at a far bigger picture rather than a webinar being 3 hours. Because all this is about is engineers talking, playing guessing games based on a picture, trying to make people realize there's a bigger picture, a better thought process. If it's about, I just need to go and find a black and white answer, then there's a bigger picture and a bigger issue that we maybe need to look at ourselves as individuals and maybe as an industry. But this won't be 3 hours, I promise you, unless you want it to be 3 hours. So we can do whatever you want. Right. Let's go into one of these before we get into the pictures. There's a couple of really controversial ones. Yep. So the biggest argument, I think, in the history of social media is the best practice guide issues cables installed within a prescribed zone at less than 50 mil depth as a C3. In here, we have it as a C2. I personally think it's a C3 as well. Richard, what's your view?
First and foremost, it's a limitation. You shouldn't be checking for it. It's one of the limitations. So why are we even having this discussion? The idea is it's in the limitations. If you're walking around a property, the favourite is wall lights, and then they've wallpapered over the cable, or it's not very deep, and then it's zigzagging across the wall. So if you see it and there's potential for it to get nailed, then that's kind of where we were coming from. That was what it was designed for. But we had to have a yardstick, so that's the way we wrote that. 40 codes in there, so if one of them's got a few words wrong in it and it didn't come out like it's supposed to in the wash, well, you know, there you go. But that's what it was supposed to be there for.
Right, so it was basically lots of various scenarios then.
So many variations on a theme for... Okay. And if you just go back to the previous one, you're doing a PRS installation and you see some that are very close, not inside the zone for argument's sake, no RCD protection, and you go, well, best practice guide says a C3, I'm going to C3 that. Well, even then, that says an improvement is recommended. If your landlord then doesn't, well, I'm not going to do that. Along comes a client who, or a tenant, and it's their home, got a picture, want to put something up, not really understanding zones or anything like that, bang, they're going to get a shock. They could die, they could be seriously injured. Then it's all going to go pear-shaped, and it was given a C3, well, that's satisfactory, and the BIC's going to say, how can something as dangerous as that and an improvement recommended be satisfactory? Surely that's not right. So that's the angle we were coming from. So, okay. But we've always said it's a starter for 10. We've never said that you should do this, you should code this. It's to give people an idea of where we were thinking of.
It goes around. This was brought up. We
were trying to evolve. The book's designed to evolve. The front, and it evolved from the first. It evolved into this, and it evolved again. So if it around again, I might tinker around with that. Now, it's 4 different observations for the same thing. So
it's fair to say though. It's fair to say. I mean, the code breaker gets a good bit of kick in because of this code. Oh, you know, it's a C2 when they say it's a C3. Paul, you said it's a C3.
Yeah.
Why'd you say it's a C3?
I actually, believe it or not, the reason I say it's a C3 is I remember the days when we would wire houses and we didn't need an RCD, and RCD was supplementary protection.
Yeah.
The one thing I love is about the prescribed zones is, and your dad has actually, because your dad's in here, by the way, watching.
Yeah, probably.
Your dad's made a comment, and it says, to an extent, it's pointless putting the cables in the zones anyway if we do not tell the client where the zones cables are. How many of us explain this to the client? There's some merit in that.
Point. We talk about zones and cables. Yeah. If you're my wife, don't put a picture there. It's got to go inside a zone. What the?
Again.
And I'll put it where I want to put it. It's pretty over there.
I said this on the previous webinar. We have mention of operational manual mentioning guys note 3. Why isn't it required for us to provide drawings of the cable zones on the commissioning of an initial verification for the clients to use the system later? I deliberately don't answer this one because I like people kind of flying off before I give my answer, but I'll give you my answer. I think it's a C2 or a C3, depending on if it's a commercial or a domestic. In commercial environments, you normally require permission or you require some level of instruction observation to break building fabric. In the domestic, you can have carelessness by users of the building. Now, the regulation itself talks about burying the cable less than 50 mil, and it also says you have to have a protection of 415.1.1. 415.1.1 is additional protection with it being mentioned carelessness by users. And so, as we did last week, where we come up with them ashore, In this case, I'll come up with what was her name? Mary Werry, the MP's daughter. She was killed. It was
the MP's daughter. Yeah.
It was a cable to a cooker hood. Company rewired the kitchen in 1999, and 3 years later, her husband put up the utensil holder. It was out of the zones, but the requirement of the regulation .6.202 says, that additional protection shall also be provided. So the RCD protection is also needed as well as the zones. Now, she was killed. Now, she was killed in a home where homes today are much smaller in the kitchens, much more exposed class 1 pieces of equipment, more things that you can touch. Carelessness by users in the domestic is very viable. And to me, it's still a C2 in domestic.
And I think this is one of the reasons why we were saying...
the Kickstarter for Part P. That's what... Well, I say it wasn't the Kickstarter.
It was kind of, I mean, Part P was already discussed in discussions, but that was the one that was the
one that shoved it over the edge and went, right, that's it.
But again, as we did last week, Paul, where we looked at the room and we looked at the pipe work, I always think, why don't electricians get from electrical safety first, these packages of media information about this person has died because of this. So when we do inspections, we can always remember, because in a law, a judge, he'll hear about this. Why it has a regulation. He'll hear about previous fatalities, and this is why we now do it this way. Electricians must study or have offered to them by electrical safety first case studies that we can then understand why these regulations are changed.
Before we move on, and I just want to add a little bit in this. So for me, cables buried in the wall, I hate to say it, for me, I start on a C3 on this. And the reason I say that is because the use of RCDs, the things we know about RCDs now, the installation, the mutual interaction with the fixed electrical installation and the RCD, especially with Type AC now, I can't, on hand on heart, say if I'm in an installation and there's a solar PV array and an EV charger going, that RCD is actually going to do anything anyway. So I'm going to be C3ing the RCD, never mind that whether the cables are not buried at that certain depth.
But the regulation requires... Yeah, the regulation requires it. Additional protection of 415.1.
Yeah, I know.
So,
I just what I don't understand is, and forgive me for sounding blunt, brutal, and stupid, which I don't mind. You've got this book. Codebreaker says one thing, but Electrical Safety First says another, and it is the cause of so many arguments. And a lot of electricians will genuinely say, and Mr. Holmes has said it in the chat, if I come to my own code and I have to back it up in court, I will use industry guidance to plead my case.
But this is what you guys in the chat need to do now. You need to Google Mary Werry. Okay, she was electrocuted in the kitchen because the cable was outside of the zone, but the utensil holder was put up years before. But it was only when she made contact with that and the washing machine. And the point of that regulation is to provide additional protection, and additional protection uses the word carelessness by users. The domestic environment is carelessness by users is the domestic world. Yeah, because there's no authorization process. People can drill holes in the building fabric wherever they want. Yeah. So it's potentially dangerous. This is why I said this earlier on. The C2 shouldn't mean immediate unsatisfactory. It must be declared as potentially dangerous in that scenario. But that means it's a C2, which means it's unsatisfactory. I'm not going to do that. And that's the problem. We have electricians that don't want to code because they don't want the outcome. But the coding needs to match the risk. And she died. How can it not be potentially dangerous?
That's a very valid point. I think my counter argument is where would we be then if we had additional protection by RCD, but the additional protection by RCD didn't work?
Well, that comes down to our selection of protection, but first we need to be told we need the protection. Right now, we're not installing
protection. Else, isn't it?
It is. It is.
But it's not working. That's a different issue.
No, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about it not working. I'm talking about the continued use, the alterations to the installation, and the fixed equipment causing the RCD not to work.
Yeah, that's another issue. That's a completely different issue.
But it could be a contributing
reason. Assuming the RCD works properly.
But are you saying, well, that's a reason not to select additional protection?
No.
Would you argue that in front of a judge?
No. What I'm saying is the judge could argue that with me. So if I then said, the judge said, why didn't you do something about the RCD? I could say, well, as far as I was concerned, there was an AC type RCD in there, but I didn't know, or I wasn't aware there was an EMC issue or an EMI issue where there was sufficient leakage or blinding of the RCD. So
well,
when the measure
this is
was
touching
required
on
to
the stuff
disconnect,
we've been talking about for 3 months, where we have not got sufficient information. So now we have to find out how. Yeah, it does. But at the end of the day, we still need to have one problem handled separately to another. And this right now is us saying, okay, cables burn the wall less than 50 mil, which Richard has said is always going to be a limb, because we're not going to immediately trace those cables. So if we leave them going with legacy as a limb, and we don't just have the extra application of additional protection, then we're going nowhere.
I think we could do an entire webinar just on
we
this.
We could. We probably need to move on.
Right, let's move on. Silly photo times. Let's crack on. Do you want to get the poll going? So this was in an office. It's just stupid 101, really. Somebody's asked for a heater. They've evidently been putting their feet up on the said heater because they've dented it or damaged it. Yeah, that's obviously caused the trunking above to warp and melt. So what do we think this is? Oh God, my mouse is not working again. What do we all think this is? What is this?
Well, let's assume that there's, I mean, I can't see. Is that sheath cable behind there?
Well,
or is it singles?
It's singles,
so we assume that it's single insulated cable.
So all right, so we'll assume that single insulation is now exposed. That kind of helps us escalate that.
But then, or do we do it too? Let's say you've got single insulated cables in because it's an office environment, so that's how that's probably been put together. And then, well, if it was put together with a sheath, because it's two different outcomes.
Two different outcomes, yeah. So, well, we have got, let me just share this because most people had now to go. So I've got a dog's licking my hand. Back up. Right. Sorry. There we go.
His dog's licking his thing.
Licking my hand. Right, he's fucked up. All right. So everyone's gone C2. Pretty much. We've had 3 C3s, 4 C1s, and 29 C2s.
Okay, so the first time I saw this, so this is one from my personal collection. It was in an office of a company that I used to work for. And the first time I saw it, my brain immediately went C3, but if that trunking warps anymore, it will become a C2. And I literally went in the next day, and it was like that. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's C2 now. Yeah. So yeah, no, that's pretty good observation. Right, moving on.
Okay.
If this works. Again, standard thing you see in a lot of offices. It's a bit rough as anything, that one is. That was underneath some desks. It was just a cluster mess of rubbish, really. Again, but in a commercial premises. That was under some desk counters where you can, go and pay for things. And yeah, broken socket, just rough installation of data and power cables. You can see single sheath cables there.
Yeah,
weren't great.
Let me just add to this. So if you see this and you code it and you remedy, is the remedy for this just replacement for plastic? If you've observed there's an impact problem here.
I'll be honest with you, Dave.
No,
very good point.
I think you've got to go to the client and say, look, this has been busted off. It's obviously not a light use area. Maybe we need to think about something else.
Dave, do you know what? You're absolutely right, because where that is at the bottom of the desk where the staff's feet are. So naturally, the staff are kicking where the dado's been installed, once again, because nothing has been coordinated. But yeah, no, it's a valid point. So do you want to, have you run the poll?
I have. We will share this one.
C1, yeah, bang on. Bang on, pretty good.
Yeah. But again, important to think about that. If we just swap like for like, because with C1s we're supposed to remedy, that's fine. But if you remedy that with a like for like replacement, that's probably not doing what you should be doing as the experienced person.
Yeah, we've got to pick equipment that is fit for purpose to the environment that it's going to be exposed to. You may need to think about something else or moving it.
Yeah. Somebody's put C2 with FI. I can't stand people who use FIs myself. Okay, just very clear here. I, as you can see from the codes, I always, my brain investigate. I then work through the coding. It was how I was taught. It's quite a good logical way process of elimination. I probably was a little bit FI happy in the last one. For that, I can't apologise, period. It's just the way my brain's wired. Sorry, guys. Right, let's move on. If it ever works. If it ever works. I need to change the battery to
look at the chat while you're doing that. Oh.
Yeah.
That
was in an office that I was visiting. Just look at the state of it, really. Poor fixings.
Just plasterboard fixings, isn't it?
Yeah. A few spur.
Okay.
Not great. Just something really, to me, you just go and fix straight away, really, or at least switch off and disconnect it, make it safe.
Again, I mean, fixing that might actually require some studs to be put in the wall or something. It might not be you're just gonna, So this might be a
for me, if it was loose,
becomes a 2-hour job.
It would be a C3. If I could see that was loose and coming off the wall, it'd be a C3. But given the state it's in, for me, it's a C2 because it's an accident.
It's got to be a C2. That's, the local letting agents where I live, I do quite a lot of periodics for theirs, and I went to a one that was being used as a homeopathic Chinese cure thing, and I'm walking around, and I said, "Oh, where all the rooms go to?" Blah blah blah. She went, "Oh, up there." And so I'm walking along, and there's this step, and I trod on this step. I thought, well, that's a bit crunchy, bloody hot as well. And I carried on, and it wasn't until I was coming back I realised that they didn't have a step up into the next level in the room. So the landlord had laid the storage heater, a really big old one, so it's quite deep, on the deck, and it was a step. It was a bona fide step. That was the step that they used to get in to the next level. Unbelievable. You'd walk on that one and then up another one, so it's like 2 steps, and that was the bottom step. So there, and that's still there as well.
So we're saying C2s. What did the poll say? Your dad, Dave, says C1 everything.
EC1's everything.
EC1's everything. That's fine.
C2.
His engineering judgment and his narrative, as he can justify it, great, absolutely, which I'm sure he can.
Well,
that's a good balance there, actually.
Hang on, before we go moving on, and we say, oh no, it's not C1, where that cable's pulled real tight like that, that didn't lightly just
this is
onto the deck.
Yeah.
That's come down with a almighty bang. What if it's pulled that cable out and now that casing's live?
I've not looked at chat, but I'm going to speak on behalf of Phil, and I expect this is going to be his answer. The reason that's going to be a C1 for him is because it then puts you in the position where you've got to remove. So you go there, assuming it's on that spur there, you disconnect the load. If it was a C2, it wouldn't put you in that position, and that's something that Phil does do. He goes, "Oh, I'm going to make it C1, so I've got to do something about this right now." He kind of does it like that. Yes, it's not live. Yes, it's not exposed and live, but you want to do something.
But again, as we said in the last one, Dave, just looking at a picture without being there is only 50% of the facts that you can see. Your eyes, you have to use more than just your senses of your eyes. You wouldn't want to touch it because, absolutely right, if there is strain upon connections, it's fallen off, it's disconnected, a line conductor has made the case live, absolutely all day long, C1. So use your non-contact pen, bang, if it's live, C1, absolutely. But as you can see, someone switched it off and obviously taken a photo. So it's that sort of, you just got to code it based on all the senses. It's not just what we see. And this is why the photographs always, they very much easily lead to an argument where what they should do is lead to, I hate to say it, further investigation in the mind.
Shush.
Sorry.
But yeah, it's true. It's true.
Right, let's move on.
Okay,
coding. So this is one of my favourites. So this was in a feeder pillar cabinet for some car park lighting.
Oh, so this is one of those heaters that keeps the pillar kind of dry.
Anti-condensation heaters, gotcha. Yes. So as you can see from the label, the wisdom of the words, caution, heater may be hot. Yeah, no.
Don't need that label anymore, do you?
Nope, we've evidenced it with scorching and thermal events. But the picture on the right is the same one because upon investigation, if you can see, there's like a little rubber grommet built into it, and it had basically cooked the cables. The cables were completely brittle inside. You can actually see if you look. You can see
cracked. Copper in
you can. They're cracked.
Yeah, that is got too
they are cooked. And there was no thermostatic control on that whatsoever because the thermostat that was in the cupboard had been turned all the way up and was just baking and baking and baking and baking. And
what's that cable rated for? It's not HO.
Doesn't look like it's got any higher rated than 70 degrees. Really,
it just looks like a bit of old flex.
It is a bit of old flex, not even a bit of butyl. The cheap.
No, that's what I mean. You should probably, sometimes you get away with that and it'd be okay, light use, but that's just.
They're one of the ones where you look at that and you think that's a lovely bit of plywood that that's sitting on, brand new installation. Within 6 months, that fucker's gone and ruined it. But what do you guys think as far as the coding? So I'm opening that up. I'm outside. It could be raining.
Yeah, I think I'm C1 there.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure, gone to C1 there.
But it was great. It was great because when that was found, it was a matter of, oh, look at the irony of the label and the scorching, ha ha ha. But on further investigation, actually, it's potentially quite dangerous. That's why using a voltage pen indicator.
Was it in a
detector
feeder pillar? So was it locked?
Yes, it was in a locked feeder pillar. Yes.
Right. So anyone who actually accessed it would have like authorization.
Yes.
Would that lower your risk, or would you stick C1 still, even because it's like, I mean, you can see the scorch. A couple of guys have mentioned C2, so I'm not saying C2. I'm trying to say, right, can we assess risk less here? Because of the way
you can assess it. You can assess it.
I can see where they're coming from. So
yeah.
If it's locked and no one's got access to it, who's going to go and touch it?
Exactly.
Yes.
So it's on a bit of words.
So the argument we've had before, if you've not got access to it, then can you downgrade it to a C3?
Okay. So take the feeder pillar.
C3 could sit there forever and ever and ever.
So take the feeder pillar then, take it out of the car park, put it on a railway platform. If that catches fire, that stops an entire railway. That
right, so not in a big car park, but on a railway.
Which you do get feeder pillars on platforms. You do get feeder pillars on railway platforms. Okay. Now, it's a commercial activity. A railway is a commercial activity. Okay. The installation should be industrial, but it's a commercial activity. If a feeder pillar on a platform caught fire, you have a mass disruption to railway, lots of delay minutes, mega cost. So yes, you have control measures, but that at some point is going to just keep burning, and either just combust the backboard after a lot more time, or the cable will just melt and catch fire.
So should commercial impact affect coding?
Instead of downgrading it to a C3, we've all agreed it's a C1. Because you can't get to it and it's locked, and you downgraded it to a C2, so it's no longer immediately dangerous, but it has potential for risk. Still unsatisfactory, but gives you some breathing space. So it's going from a C1 to a C3. That's a big extreme.
There's a bit of a movement.
So can I just finish this off now? It's a C1. Anything like that, it's me going to prison.
I think it should be an F5, Paul.
The 5.
My seat's getting warm.
F5.
I mean, clearly it's showing signs it's heating as well, so that does show you it's on a journey.
The commercial impact. Okay, so
my personal opinion.
Let me give you my view as a client here. The commercial impact of that causing an incident and revenue loss, if it was on a railway platform, for instance, is huge. In a car park, it's far less. So again, the context of the installation is always key. But the duty of care that I owe to my staff and my contractors to not walk away from that and empower them. There is so much health and safety at work legislation I would be in breach of. If my contractor walked away from that and went, yeah, you might want to improve that, I would want my contractor to turn around and go, that's not right. I'm switching it off, and I'm telling the client I've switched it off, and I would give them a pat on the back. Some other clients would go, oh no, it's terrible. Then fine. I'd expect a contractor, if I was a contractor, I'd issue a danger notification and say, I'm not switching that back on, mate. It's dangerous. I've done you a favour. And when you think about the impact to your business and continuity of your operations, regardless of where it is, then they're not going to argue with you. But they sometimes want people to take them on a journey of education. And that's what I found when I was a contractor with dumb clients. I had to educate them the reasons why, build the trust, and then they would empower me. And that was one of the things I found. It's
interesting in the chat. There's a lot of talk about fire. I mean, Phil's obviously going fire's a fire, so he's going C1. A couple of guys are going yes, fire risk. Neil's got the Neil's saying it's just a little bit over the top in his opinion, so he's thinking C2.
Maybe that's Neil Bridgman.
Neil Bridgman, yeah.
It doesn't matter what he's got to say anyway.
But Neil, you work on rail. I mean, if this was on rail, would that escalate it to C1? Let us know.
C1,
or let us know your C2, because I want we can't upload the chat on the video when we watch this back, but I want to say what you guys are typing, because everyone's opinion is important here.
Neil, if you didn't see one that, I'd sack you immediately. There you go. Sorry,
I know we're arguing over two codes that are both going to be unsatisfactory. Come on.
Yeah, FI.
I tell you what, yeah, let's have FI. Then it's all three of the unsatisfactory codes.
I think the point being is though, depending on the operational use and the impact, I don't think anyone's not disagreeing. It's either a C1 or a C2.
Yeah.
For me, as an employer, as well as an electrician, I'm telling you now, I can't walk away from that, knowing that the cable's melted and the internal cores are mullered and you can see copper and it's damaging. Common sense to me is I've got my contractor who is my control measure. Why would my control measure leave it?
Limitations. Isn't this down to the conversation you have with your client? So your tester would come to you and
yes, but hang on. No contractor.
If you see in the C1.
Hang on. The business that employs every single commercial operation always has safety policies, safety first. If a contractor walks away from something that could damage the operations of the business, that business won't want that contractor. Yes, it may be a phone call there and then saying, look, I've got this, it's damaged, I need permission to switch it off. And that's the difference between a good contractor and a bad contractor. If Neil found that, Neil would have my permission to switch that off immediately, regardless, period.
Right.
Some bad clients won't allow that, but you've still got to discharge your duty of care. So I don't think anyone's going to disagree.
Again, a lot of it you're saying is also you're thinking about yourself as your responsibilities with your job. And, you know, for a lot of inspectors, they don't have that relationship.
That's
or they
true.
don't have clients that give that much of a shit. And so for them to kind of think about it that much, it's going to be quite a bit of a journey.
If I was purely inspecting it, if I was genuinely purely inspecting it, I would be starting at a C2 with that.
Some inspectors will take a picture of that and might report it to their client a week later. Now, would you want it to be immediately rectified or immediately called on it?
Once I knew of it,
would you be pissed off if the guy said, 2 weeks later, yeah, that's also a bit odd?
But personally speaking, if my contractors found something like that, I would want them to remedy it immediately, period. And that's why I was saying to Neil, it's something that I would get a kicking for. There's too much of a risk to a business. But you're absolutely right. There are some bad uns out there. I'm not going to deny that because I've worked for some of the bad uns. But if I was still on the tools doing inspecting, I would probably say, do you know what, there's potential danger there. I want to fix this immediately. And if they say no, then I issue a danger notification there and then. However, most commercial organisations that I have ever worked for, and this is my opinion, most of them work, and Neil will agree with me here, the safety first, don't walk on by. They have all these safety messages. You have to use the duty of care and the health and safety legislation to remind the clients of their obligations.
He's just said in the chat, I mean, I've noticed this. It's a 100-watt heater.
Yeah.
Is it potential that those scorch marks are from that heater or from the heater it's replaced?
No.
I mean, we can see the cable is clearly not happy.
No.
You know.
Well, we can talk about that offline.
I think the size of the heater is irrelevant. If it's a small confined space, it's going to get hot in there. So.
Okay, so let's agree C1, maybe C2 with regards to the containment and limited access, which means we acknowledge the C2s in chat. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would happily agree with the C2 because it's within a metal enclosure.
Yeah.
As well, feeder pillars are generally metal enclosures, which generally contain.
I've worked with some wooden ones. There's still some around.
Yeah. Oh no, that's just ply lined though, so that bit would burn, but hopefully it would contain it. Right, moving on. Yeah. It's a good one. I knew this commercial industrial one would have some great debates in this. Right, greatest earth bond collection in the world.
What's wrong with that?
Open up the board. It's 3-phase. You look at that and you think, oh God. What do we think?
Go to the poll.
We'll go to the poll.
Yeah.
All right. We have a poll and then say what we think.
Yeah. Because this might be one that does kind of split.
Yeah, I think this is going to be another heavy debate, actually.
It was interesting because I'm looking at brass here, so I'm thinking about obviously brass things. I'm thinking about, like glands and things. There was a discussion in the Facebook group this afternoon. Someone on there put up a picture from some other person's observations where they commented that on a gland, that the actual gland was made off with a tool that had kind of rounded it off a little bit.
Oh, damaged the gland. I saw that.
Yeah. you know, and there was a lot of people going, "Oh, you can't code that." Apparently, it was coded. It was coded. So, and this is why it was brought onto the thing. Going, is this a bit much? You know, it brought quite a bit of a heated debate, and I was like, "Oh God."
I'll be honest with you. When I was inspecting, I had to do 57 three-phase boards on a job, and on my snag list went into a lot, hundreds, thousands. You can code basic good workmanship material.
There were some interesting comments about, you know, if it's ATEX and stuff. So, you know, some people have really got big opinions of it.
Application of risk is got to be specific to the user, the environment, the conditions, and the operations of the installation. C3, yeah. So that was good call, because that's just a fly lead off of a banjo of the armoured coming into the board. So yeah. So
what would we do? I mean, what would we do there? Would we just leave it?
No, for me, that's just put a crimp lug on it or change it.
Yeah, minimum would be a C3, put a copper on it and make that off properly.
Yeah,
that copper's being pulled down onto paint, so you only get in half of its
surface area contact.
Surface area. And if you look at the conductors on the outside, it's not going to take a lot for them to pop out of there. They're only held on by the corners of the...
it's obviously, I mean, that's a little wiggle, and that's going to let go of that.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you're into reduced cross-sectional area of current carrying capacity in the event. So
now this, to me, is one of the few earthing codes that I actually do C3, because on a lot of earthing systems, if it's to deal with a protective bonding conductor, an earthing conductor, or a CPC, I will look at the C2s as a default solution. But this one here, due to the fact that most of your earthing is actually going to be via that gland and that brass nut, which is going into the panel.
Integrity is required, surely.
Yeah, that's just poor
to be
workmanship
fair,
materials.
if you're going to do that, at least put a washer on it so that it bounce the cable down properly. You know what I mean? If you're going to,
where did we get him from again?
Do a crap job. Do a crap job properly and use a washer.
Do a proper wash.
Hang on. Let me just get on the phone. Yeah, NIC. Yeah, we got this bloke talking about penny. Oh dear, can we just get? Oh, penny wash. Where are you born? Right.
Yeah, for me, it's a lug all day long. That needs to be.
It is. It's a simple lug job. Right. This is slightly different. So this is a shop. This was sent to me, and this was basically a distribution that was found in the back of a shop in a dirty, crappy storage area, and above the shop were flats.
Yeah. So one flat per block.
You what?
Are the flats powered off that lot?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it one block per flat then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what was sent. Now, I'll be honest with you. Where do you start with that? That's just an utter mess.
Okay. I start with my C3s, then I go up.
I think what they were doing there was at some point that board, the meter board, had been renewed and stuff had been moved around. Those Henley blocks were putting as a through joint to link those cables. But
you've got to be looking at least.
I was mesmerised by that.
And is this high up, out of the way?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's in the top of the storage.
Is that the meter there, or is that a timer?
That is a meter, which was for the shop premises. The three-phase supply was below that. There was some more switchgear, but this was the interesting bit that got sent to me. And the minute I saw it, I was mesmerised by it. I went, what the hell is going on there? And I was literally told this is being used to joint the supplies for the flats above. And I just thought, wow, that is just...
Well, for me, there are 1, 2, 3 different things to code there, and they'd all have the same code from me.
Okay. Stanners has got it as FI. He's on the ball. Well done, Stanners. You're on it. You're on it.
What's this? Who spotted thermal damage?
Dust. Where's that?
Dirt.
Oh yeah. Is that conductor? Yeah. Is it that thermal damage, or is that where they've got a pair of pliers on it and they've been wrenching it in and out? Because it just looks like it's been chewed flat.
Oh, you mean the right one to the right?
This one here. Can you see the red one arrow there? Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one.
Like someone's got a pair of pliers and their teeth marks.
Well, it must be an FI for that bit then, just to determine.
It does actually look like it's bubbling and
does look like it's a bit bubbly. Yeah.
Is it bubbly, or they just flattened it with pliers to?
No, I think that's bubbling. Actually, I think that's
Well, it definitely warrants
cables, they would swell up, wouldn't they? They would swell up when they started to get hot.
Okay.
But yeah, it's an FI. No, it's not. A C2 minimum for me.
Well, C2 because you've got single insulated cable side of the enclosure, so that gives you a C2 straight away. The cables are not supported, so someone's to wiggle them around. They'll soon pop out of those only blocks or issues. Earth marshalling block, if that's jokably you'd want to call it, that seems to be hanging in the breeze as well. So that would need to be adequately fixed for me. So a couple of C2s there for me.
Is it, if you have C3s in this scenario, is it actually worth recording them? Bear in mind that everything else is a C2.
Yeah.
You know, it's like as stupid as the labelling, safety electrical connection labels, not that.
Well,
Why would
you've got to put it in, you've got to put what you see, but when you fix one of the C2s, you automatically fix the other one.
Yeah, I think for me, due diligence is listing everything you see. Otherwise, you could say, well, that's not quite right. You could apply mechanical protection, and then someone will go, just put some boxing around it. Then there's your barrier. What's next? Oh, well, you didn't really have the earth labels, or you didn't have it sheathed, and you didn't have this. For me, you're there to do a diligent job.
Everything listed.
I would list everything always. That's how I was taught.
Yeah, you'd need to list everything. You couldn't just say that's a C2 because you've got to put a regulation against.
You're doing half a job.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on the extent and limitation of the work and the time and what you're priced for and all that good stuff.
Okay.
Obviously, there's no green and yellow on there, so that's a C1.
Let me just stop sharing that one. Okay.
Right. This is the next one. This is a commercial installation.
So what are we looking at? The crimp down there?
So no. What this is actually a mains voltage CCTV Frankenstein's mess. And this was in a former railway station that I worked in on another route. This is not on my current railway, but it's just a mess because that's basically how you found it. You just walked into the room and there's the lid off and fully accessible to anyone. There's an earth bar below it. There's a 240 volt AC there with the double pole main switch. All the mains voltage connections were behind it. And this was just loads and loads of coaxes brought in and terminated. And
is this in a locked room?
No, this is in a room that any person could access. So this
staff
is in
or public?
Staff.
Staff.
And unskilled staff, by the way.
Unskilled.
Yes, and not instructed staff either.
Uninstructed, unskilled
this
staff.
just left that way.
That's just going to be a C1, isn't it? All day. You know, like if it's mains voltage and it's accessible, then.
I think Neil's waiting to put. What's Neil put in? Has he put C3 FI? He does like his FIs actually. Looks like red tape. Yeah, for me, this was a C1. This is just, it's unacceptable in a workplace. And remember saying, regardless of wherever you are, you're in a workplace. And in the domestic home, yes, there's electricity work regulations. But the minute you start going into other people's workplaces, that duty of care becomes, there's so many regulations. There's so much legislation that's on the employer, protection of the staff, the workplace, equipment fit for use, ensuring that there are barriers, all that sort of stuff. That's just a mess left by some, I'm going to say it's some twatty comms contractor who couldn't be asked to do a good job and just left the cover off and buggered off, basically. Absolutely annoying. So you see the connect block in the top of the trunking as well, right at the top of the picture.
Yeah.
Even connect blocks in it. It's just like, it's just uncontrolled.
This is one of those scenarios, though, where the more you sit there, the more you write down.
Yes, and the thing is as well, this is where when you are advising your client, because your client may say, help me fix this. And one of the things we need to, me and you talk about, Dave, all the time, it's about controlling access to your installations, making sure that only persons are authorised to work on or near this stuff. You have a duty to protect the staff, the public, and that's what makes commercial installations, to me, a bit more stimulating of the brain. Although the domestic is just as stimulating, I find the commercial, the argument, the debate is a far bigger debate, to be honest, because you can talk about pure provision and use of workplace equipment regulations and the duty to maintain that. Do you think under provision and use of workplace equipment that's ever been maintained? No.
Again, with me, when I inspect installations, I think of BS 7671, obviously, because I've got that. mundane need to do that. But I also think about legislative work regulations, and I think about everyone else at work. So if you say this is every person at work, I'll look at who's walking past this, and I'll look at their work, and I'll assess what authorizations they have.
Do I say the word "that boils my piss" a lot? I think I must do. Sorry.
What's that?
In the chat, I'm just saying, does that boil your piss? Yes, it does. Absolutely annoys the hell out of me. That puts my blood pressure in the DNA numbers. There's another term for you. Try not to swear. When you work as a client, you're not supposed to swear, you see, apparently.
Oh, well.
Very difficult. Here's a good one.
This was the results of that last one.
Oh, sorry.
So there you go. So majority of people were going C1 on that one.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can see there was Neil with his FI. Good on him.
Is that salt accumulation, or is it the aluminium that the box is made of just rotted away?
That was efflorescence through a wall. That was a power supply to a fire alarm isolator. So it's mains voltage, all wired in pyro, thank God. But yeah, I found this 15 years ago. And yeah, it was just efflorescence and corrosion, and the actual isolator itself just bursting and just rotting, basically. And when we eventually opened it, it was full of water as well.
The equipment's no longer fit for purpose.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the old C50 box, so you can see it's a good 20, 30 years old. You see the rust and corrosion. It's rusting clearly, from where the fixings are.
It's showing sign of life expiry.
50 years, that's pretty good going.
Oh, yeah, it is. And this is the beauty of the old stuff, isn't it? It's the pyro, and this stuff, it's lasted for years. But, I mean, what it was gas detection circuits and a panel, because it was in an area, basically, where there were gas pipes running through a commercial premises, funny enough, and this was in London. And I was there, and I was going, okay. And that was the first time I learned about confined spaces. And, you know, looking back now, you're probably looking at it would be a Compex or ATEX area as well. But just because that was taken on my phone at the time. But yeah, I would say it's C2. What's everybody else?
I just caught Sean says, okay, so Paul, can you help us understand further regulations beyond 7671? It seems we already know that stuff might be wrong, but how do we support our OB with evidence?
Observations, I'm assuming, with evidence. So this is kind of like when I used to do my coding, I would sit there and I'd read the regulations and I'd go, this isn't enough. So then I would go, okay, if that isn't enough, what sits above the regs? And it would be electricity work regs. I then went and got forced to do some health and safety training, and I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy it because my attitude was wrong. When I realized that my attitude was wrong, I went and redid the training, and I realized there was tons of duty of care legislation. And the best advice that was ever given to me was a scaffolder who was teaching us on our NEBOSH. And he turned around, and no word of a lie, he sat there and, all right, boys, yeah. Provision and use workplace equipment regs, load of old bollocks. Electricity at work regs, load of old bollocks. Working at height regs, load of old bollocks. And he would quote all these regulations, go to a load of old bollocks. And then we'd go, what? And he'd go, the reason they all exist is because no fucker reads the Health and Safety at Work Act and understands the duty of care in that. So each sector and specific discipline needs its own specific guidance. Management of health and safety at work regulations. There's a Health and Safety at Work Act. So they have to have a subset of regulations that defines it more, because it's open to interpretation, and the interpretation always is what's the quickest, dirtiest, and cheapest. And that doesn't fulfil the duties.
But moving further down the line,
yeah,
electricians gone on apprenticeships. Legislation is one of those subjects that is initially brought in with health and safety, and a lot of the times it's kind of considered as a boring load of tosh to get past to then move on. A lot of courses, we'll just talk about legislation, let's just talk about the law for a bit, because we have to. When we come to do this work, we need to really be on the ball to properly inform the client of their statutory obligations.
Yep.
But it just seems that we don't kind of show this in a way, 2391, all these other courses, it's a little slide or two as part of the beginning of a course. And we don't really have the exploration into these standards, into these legislations, to then translate them into this work.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I mean, I was actually talking to a guy yesterday who let's get on to that, because there's actually a slide in the video. So we're going into the future now.
I mean, I'm assuming there's some legislation stuff in the code break as well.
Yeah, there is, because at the end of the day, that book. Tell me if I'm wrong here, Richard. It's an interpretation on those duties within the legislation, it's advising on the legislative obligation.
We do cover it. There is a little bit in there, but again,
it's the translation, though, isn't it?
Where do you stop? How can you? It's not for a client to read this and worry about their legislation. So each client has got their own different legislation and stuff that they need to comply with, and those legislations, they say, well, this is really dangerous, so we need you to pay more attention to it. Like Paul saying, well, that's C1 on my railway. Well, that's because you're on a railway. If you're on a farm and you've got half a dozen cows walking by it, that farmer or that mass producer of farm food might think, cares, really, you know.
If you don't mind me saying, so that primary legislation, that a total duty of care under that. So in the workplace, Health and Safety at Work Act is that primary legislation. You then have to filter through if it's secondary legislation, Electricity at Work Regs, Regulatory Reform Order, Management of Health and Safety at Work Act, PURE, all these other working at height regulations, asbestos management. It becomes far more, I need to demonstrate a legal duty of care and a management system. So in the commercial workplace, when you're going into like a shopping centre like Westfield as a business will have a health and safety policy as an employer. That policy says we will follow all them guidance. We will employ competent people that kind of understand what our duties are. We will select a competent supply chain. We will ensure that supply chain is competent. And this is where they say, oh, have you got an NIC badge or an Napit badge? Great, you're competent, which we know doesn't necessarily always get the job done. Sorry, Richard, but it doesn't.
No, you have to be you've got to be competent to do the work you're tasked with doing.
Yes,
just because
it's competence relative to the nature of the work.
So if you're fitting out an specialist in the rail industry, and someone says, "Can you go and do a couple of PRSs for me this week, or PRS inspections?" There's a good chance
they're most likely not competent. Yeah, it's a fair statement. We've said this again and again, relative to the nature of the work.
They work on experience in and they go and look at a couple of flats from Mrs. Miggins' pie shop. They'll be C1 in an FI and everything for just being in there. There'll be pots of boiled piss everywhere.
I always say to people, with the wiring regulations, it's I always say to people, don't memorise it, just learn the fundamental principles and try and stitch that into a legal obligation, a legal duty of care, because we're all taught in college about the certain regulations that are shalls, and we're all taught about the defence regulation. I agree. I think it's a C2, regardless of what that alarm system is or could be or should be. I think just on that visual alone, the equipment is life expired, the external influences, that efflorescence, that porous nature of that wall. I mean, for me, straight away, if you're mounting onto old walls, I always say use a piece of shallow unistrut anyway. And then that's your sacrificial anode. That's the bit that will corrode. And then you can at least extend the life of the equipment. But again, it's using that engineering logic, that engineering judgment. Let me just have a quick look on the... So
the poll is pretty split. Neil and John have both gone down the C2, but with an FI, and the FI may escalate it to a C1. You know, you've got to investigate any impact of corrosion as to whether that enclosure is actually in enclosure anymore.
So Neil has also said fire alarms are not classed as life-saving. Well, I think technically, yes, he's right, but technically also he's wrong.
Sprinklers are saving.
Yes. It's a safety system. Like emergency lighting is a safety system. But yeah, right. Anything else? No, I think we'll move on for that one. I think that was a good one. This is one of my personal favourites. We've done this before. This is the bodge of bodges. So this was a railway. This was, I think it was just somewhere on the Great Northern Route. The contractor put 4x4 trunking in, as you can see. Originally, that was an IP65 light with just a standard coupler. The cables were lying in the trunking. I renamed the trunking the gutter. When I went to inspect this as a client, and this was one of my first jobs as a client, the light was full of water. It was in the middle of the day, and I turned around to the bloke and went, "Why have you put a gutter above a light fitting? It's just going to rain. It's non-IP rated trunking." They then went away and they did this monstrosity, because I mentioned to them flange washers and all this sort of stuff to maintain. This is the bodge that they came up with.
So they
Still codable.
They just pumped it full of
mastic. But the good thing was, and this is a true story. It's a true story. No, they were still full of bloody water anyway. This is a true story that they actually thought it was really good of them to use the sticky pads and lift the cables out of the water, even though it would only have filled up where the lip of the flange is.
Consider it.
Wow.
Some people.
So, yeah, it's just there's
but
a code I could
now,
put.
this brings us to different people's thought processes.
Yes.
Well, Neil has just said
about that. They thought about that and thought,
original design plan. I knew he'd know
cables
it.
out the water, put some sticky tape.
So Neil's just said, are we coding this assuming it's full of water?
Are we coding
Is that
it
luminaire
full of water?
Is that luminaire filling with water?
You're coding it based on what you see.
Okay.
It's not full of water. This is the repairs they made.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this was a C3. This just needed improvement.
Is there evidence of water?
Yes, there was, because the actual fitting started within 6 months of finishing. They were corroding internally outwards, which is a problem that manufacturer has. Neil will agree with me on that. This was a poor design, poor selection erection. It wasn't the electrical contractor's fault. It was the designer's fault. What ended up happening was all of that got ripped out with a new system where they didn't have all this top entry stuff on IP rated fittings, and it was correctly done so that the installation had a chance at giving us a 25-year life, because on a railway we try and make stuff last more than 25 years. But yeah, good one. Right.
What's the solution with this? I mean,
it was basically what we ended up doing was we ended up putting in where the bracketry system was. We put new different types of lights, and we basically had a loop in, loop out on cable tray, armoreds on tray.
Okay,
it was armoreds.
You can put the lights above them.
No, we just had no. All we did was we had cable tray and we looped the cable up, basically into the bottom, out. And then just
so the cable. So you've moved the cable entry now. So we've moved cable entry position to
cable entry position got moved to the bottom.
So
CW glands were used, IP washers were used, standard stuff to reselect and erect it so that it was a bit more. Yeah, it was. The person who did the installation work was completely not bothered by the fact that it meant that it had to be reworked. Because in their view, if it needed to be reworked, it meant more money for them, which to me is just criminal.
Is this within hand's reach?
Yes, it was.
Of the public?
Yep.
And has risk of water ingress?
Yep.
Okay, because that pushes me upwards where the majority of people have gone.
Yeah, I mean, it was at the back of a platform, so it was behind the platform, but you could put your arm over the platform fence and do that and touch it if you wanted to. It's kind of right on the back boundary. But it's one of the classics because it's always stimulated the debate, and that was just, for me, priceless, to be honest with you, finding that.
Yeah. Okie dokie.
Right, moving on. So this is a top of a shop.
Top of a shop.
Yeah, so this is a shop. It's a pop-up shop in, like, the Westfields of the world. You know, the ones where they're a little contained unit.
Does the shop sell dust, by any chance?
No,
I think that's a pop-up shop that's been popped up and stayed popped up.
No, let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase that. Sorry, it's not a temporary pop-up shop. It's a self-contained unit within a larger shopping complex.
Oh right.
Henceforth,
I know the type.
It's like one of them ice cream type parlours or
temporary permanent.
Temporary permanent.
Is this on the floor?
No, this is on the roof. So if you got up on a ladder to go and say service.
Oh, it's on the top of the roof, so you've got the pop-up, and then this is sitting on the top.
Yes.
Oh,
it's a smaller unit within. So imagine you go to Westfield and you've got those little retailers, the fancy ones. This potentially would be sitting on the roof, although.
So someone in that little retail thing would think, do you know what? I'll just put some stuff on the roof to store it out of the way.
Yep.
Run out, and they're going to go like that. So for me, that's a C1 all day long. Some numpty, well, not a numpty, someone who's probably rented that area might just think, I'll use the roof as a bit of storage. And then once they've got something up there, have a great round to find it, put their hand right in all of that C1.
Yeah, I agree. The area is not exclusive to electricians or similar, definitely.
No, it's not at all.
And it can't be made exclusive either.
No.
Anybody can get on there.
Sorry about that. So yeah, no, it was accessible to anybody. It was just in a really bad state, to be honest with you. It just had no love and tender care for years. Also, I would argue that the installation of what they were doing with jointing cables and extending them, the bending radius on the cables was poor. Connector blocks on some of them. It's just poor alteration addition, poor management control. Again, if I was the owner of that building and the HSE said to me, do you have suitable and sufficient control measures to manage electrical safety, and being shown that because somebody had been hurt, I have no defence.
No.
And this is where good inspections and good contractors highlighting diligent, even if your contractor's a tool, your client's a tool, and you have to issue danger notifications to them. There were some clients who will never appreciate that. Sadly,
unfortunately, many don't until something goes wrong, and then they experience the HSE investigation, and they're asked to actually, document their roles, their responsibilities, their authorizations.
Now, just to be clear here,
and they don't.
To access that, you would need to be on a ladder, and that was taken by someone off a ladder who was just putting the camera up and taking a photo.
But again, someone can go up there for purposes other than accessing that
An
box.
Unskilled or uninstructed person, yes, absolutely.
Because I had the exact scenario in a factory over in Earlham, where I was up on a mute doing an EICR on a factory, and a lot of the old buzz bars that were in the mezzanine above were basically, they were no longer in use, but they were still energized. So they'd started over time ripping out the fuses to just recycle them for other parts of the factory, and they just left the boxes wide open with the mains open.
What did we get?
Yeah.
What was the score? I'm just conscious that everybody doesn't want this as a 6-hour epic.
Okay.
C1, C2s. See, I'd go C2 actually. And only the reason I'm going C2 is because it is in theory placed out of reach, although there isn't suitable control measures.
I think you could go either way, but let's not get away from it. C1, C2, that's unsatisfactory. So
it's unsatisfactory, absolutely. No,
it's not going to become satisfactory.
Get a lid for it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably lying there somewhere anyway.
It's not going to become unsatisfactory till it's been fixed. That's clear, isn't it?
No.
Right, so there we go. There's fun and games here. You open up a board and you find that. Basically, board off a board, this is. So you've got a 3-phase board. You've got that coming in. You've got the neutrals doubled up on the right.
So they've jacked the incomers to...
Yeah. And it's the daisy chain effect of 3-phase boards. You get a lot of distribution where rather than design it and do a qualitative job, it's daisy chain board off a board off a board off a board. And what you'll end up finding is you'll go into, say, I don't know, you'll go into a car park and you'll end up doing an earth loop at a lighting column, and you may not have the earth loop impedance may be too high. You may find you don't even have sufficient fault current that will disconnect the breakers that are feeding it.
Well, on top of all of that, the manufacturers don't design for you to shove in 225s and then clamp them down. So is it possible to clamp those down and get the right torque?
Expect the torque won't be achievable with that.
So on that alone, that's codable adversely for me.
Just
all of the other stuff, protection of the cables and stuff like that, because these cables are going to go to another consumer unit, and for them to be adequately protected, they've got to come back from there and then back to wherever those are fed from, which may be acceptable.
Yeah, no, it's for me, it's a C2 as a minimum, but there's some FI in there with them cables tied up, taped up, and all sorts. But there's a lot going on there. But I thought it was just a good one.
I think the FI is to go to the manufacturer and say, "Can we do?" And the answer you're going to get back from the manufacturer. They're going to go, "Nah, we're not weighing on for that one." So that's going to go C2. So FI C2.
Yeah. Mr. Mitchell has said, sadly, you're not a representative of clients. Technically, I am. Because I am a client, but yes, I get the impression, I know what you mean, because I have worked for clients who are absolute bellends and tools and idiots, and I have had to have the debate.
I used to work for facilities management, Serco, so yes, I've been a client.
Yeah, and they are hard work. It's finding the right language, and as I said in the asset management thing, asset management is a framework, a language. And if you can dial in your language into the way that clients hear, then it may help you better in communicating and cooperating with them. Right. Hang on. Let's just next one. Right. Oh, hang on. Yeah, next one. There we go.
FI.
This is
What's going on?
Well, it's all Schneider at the end of the day, isn't it, really? For me, the offence is really in the damage to the board. But, yeah, the breaker's in upside down, although...
That's an RCBO, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Button.
B50.
Down is on, up is down.
Is that a test button for an RCBO?
Yeah, it is. It is an RCBO.
Yeah, it's a 30 milliamp A-type RCBO.
Oh, yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah. It's certainly different, isn't it?
All right, so I mean, obviously...
So this was sent to me, this one, by somebody who just went, I'm scratching my head as I'm sending this to you.
They've got up, off, and down on. What more do you want? Up, off, and down.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I'd like to see the inside of it and how that's wired, since it's connected to the bus bar. I'd definitely like to see it, but I'm sure the early ones, the Schneider EZ, I think these have got a fly lead on them. I think the early ones. I'm not too sure actually.
The EZ9s. Did the EZ9s come out the top like normal?
Is that even fitted properly?
No, I don't think it's fitted properly at all. To
no, I mean the board itself, the actual frame. Is it by doing? Even though they've hacked that out, is the board?
It doesn't look like it.
Look at the top of the circuit breakers.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's home properly.
So we're all agreed, based on that picture, it's an FI. I'm joking.
Well, realistically, again,
C2.
you know it's going to be a C2, but FI, you've got to ask the manufacturer. They're going to say no.
Well, in fairness, Merlin Duran and Schneider bought Merlin Duran, so they're their boards. And I have spoken to Schneider before, and most of the Schneider stuff is supposed to be retrofittable in the EICR range.
In the right orientation.
No, that's just a lash up. I
don't think they mean turn it upside down and then hack the bottom of the board out. I don't think that was on the agenda.
Okay. So what is what is potentially dangerous here?
For me, it's the unknowns.
Is it on? Is that circuit?
Yeah, it's down.
Yeah, it's clear. It's up, off, down, on.
For me, it's the connections inside, whether there's thermal constraints on the connections, and whether that breaker will actually act as an RCBO, or will they're just trying to frig it to work as an MCB. So for me, it's a C2.
Because I don't like that. From the picture, I'd go FI.
Jonathan says EZ9 aren't compatible with the old with the Acti 9, the Menegrain equivalents now. So is it just that it doesn't fit? Is it that the Jonathan? Is it that the RCBO connectors are in the way? It just doesn't physically fit that way around.
That's a good point, actually. Dave Betteridge just said the MCBs are 10K, RCBOs are 6K. Yeah. MZ9s aren't compatible. MC9 is. Oh, well, there you go. John is okay. So it's not a compatible breaker anyway. Yeah. So if it's not a compatible breaker, then you can't guarantee the performance of it.
Those are 3871 there.
Oh, yeah, they are.
They're proper old.
Yeah, classics. M9s. And that's a 6KA. So there's a lot going on in that picture. It's quite interesting.
I'm putting my money that neither company will say they're compatible.
Okay.
Sorry.
Let's go see where we're at.
Where did everyone go?
Everyone's gone C2.
Wisdom there. Excellent. Right, moving on. This was sent to me. I quite like this one. It's a 3-phase bit of switchgear, but I zoomed in on the issue at hand because I had to look at it.
They've been using their teeth to terminate the cable.
Yeah, somebody's used a set of TTC cutters and gone a bit happy and went, not long enough, maybe strip a bit more. It doesn't need to be exposed, that brown. You're better off using just a brown bit of tape or coloured tie wrap.
I don't like to see yards and yards of that exposed.
No, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't need to be.
It shouldn't be. Look cool.
And the thing is, a lot of people do that to identify it, but that's what we've got tape for.
Yeah.
You know. So,
but also one of the things I don't like about seeing these cracks on the cuts or whatever is they could be a sign of some form of degradation. Normally, when you see splits on cables, it's because something's going wrong with the cable.
But I know in this instance, it's quite evident that they've.
This is just workmanship, isn't it?
Oh yes, it's butcher's knife. For me, this is. Am I allowed to say it yet? If everybody's doing their little things, but it's a C3. It's an easy C3.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to go.
And as Dana says, balls my fist. This does.
What? Balls my fist. This does.
Balls his fist. But it's true. I mean,
puts my blood pressure in the DNA numbers.
this kind of workmanship is just those that don't want to. The people who do the work, but then when they finish, they don't actually want to look at the work. They don't want to look back at their work. People that
that to me is an attention to detail area. To be honest with you, it's just right. Moving on. I think has everybody coded that now? Have we got the results up?
Yeah, we've got. I'll just share it. There we go.
Okay, so everyone's agreed to C3.
The C2s.
Okay, interesting. Maybe we could debate that another time as to where the C2s. I bet. Yeah, I mean, I can't see any thermal constraints, but I can see why people would do that. Here we go. Here's another great one. It's the old classic. Show the copper. I mean, I don't know if you can see there. Looks like where the cutters again.
Has that got hot? Has that got warm? That Luke?
Aha.
One on the left's hot. The
Thermal constraints. Indeed. So what we're looking at there is
I would be looking on the right. I'd be looking on the left. Thermal constraints. And to be fair, that's going to be C2. That's well on the way.
So you've got obviously bubbling. So that's, first of all, it's the sign of thermal overload or potentially loose connection. I think where that copper's discoloring, there's a loose connection in there. Also, I don't like to see the damage on the outside. That's just a bit poor.
Yes, yeah, there's a shoddy workmanship one there, but so that's one observation.
Yeah,
but this C2 here on the neutral,
but it's definitely a C2 on the neutral. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you're hearing arcing, you may escalate that even further.
Eddie's piss is boiling. Good man. Don't know why you're boiling it, but yeah, okay. I didn't realise I said it that much. I'm going to be so obsessive about it now.
Okay. Before you move on, Neil has just posted, if that heater from earlier on is a C1, then this surely has to be C1. What is the difference? Because he's saying if that was a C1 that we all agreed on, then why are we thinking this is a C2 and not a C1? Is there not enough indication of thermal impact here, or is this enough? I mean, it's clearly damaged.
It's C2 because it's still, for me, it's still contained within the enclosure.
It's contained within the enclosure that's designed to contain it.
And there's no damage on. Yeah. There's no sign of thermal damage on the breaker. No. So this is one of the ones that you've kind of arrested. But it's a valid comment, Neil.
Yeah, it's valid. I would C2, but I would probably C2 FI, and that FI would probably be looking for the potential C1 on that one. Let's just share this one.
C2, C1.
C2 and a couple of C1s.
I get where Neil's coming from, actually, to be honest, because if that was, again, if I found that, or if one of my subcontractors found that, I would be asking them to switch off immediately and re-terminate and just check all the connections, etc.
Cam says, your dad would C1. My dad C1s everything because he just wants to you do it to do the work. That's what he does. He just doesn't like leaving it.
They're great debates, though, because he's one of those guys. It's great to see that Neil's comment was brilliant, though. In all fairness, is what makes it different, and you're absolutely right.
It's important. It's important to think about it. You've got to be consistent.
The use, I think that's good. And they used a panhead screw as well, so fair play to them. Right, next one. Okay. So this was sent in to me. So this is again a lighting feeder pillar. Hopefully, most people can see that. Standard sort of shenanigans, really, with ducts and. This is the weirdest one I've probably ever seen. It looks like a set of tails that have been jointed in a
they've come later on and they've done a test on it or something to poke a test through that tape, haven't they? Or something?
Yeah, they have, but it's just that's how it was left. So it looks like somebody has bypassed an old piece of switchgear or something and done some sort of temporary bodge. Or maybe it's just a site temporary that someone did while they were ripping out switchgear on the wall. But
so it's not. It's not a secure connection.
It's not a secure connection. I can touch that. It's conductive. It is within an enclosure. Is that
resting on the front cover when it's closed? So that...
Well, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's probably very close once that cover closes. I think for me this is a C1. If I open up and found that, it's so crap. It just warrants a C1 for the silliness of it.
We're going to have the feeder, the heater debate again. Is it C1 if we lock the door?
Well, don't worry. Yeah, well, Neil's obsessed with FIs anyway, so
yeah. Okay. This is the blue going around the top of it?
I think that's just some sort of a neutral indicator.
So
these little line conductors. That's obviously the neutral one there.
Yeah, that's kind of like,
yeah, it's a weird one. It is a difficult one to.
It's as if it's been used to kind of like space it off of the lid. It's weird.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
But lighting feeder pillars, anyone who does commercial work,
the mind of a bodger, because you know, I don't know what they were thinking.
The problem is with these sorts of feeder pillars as well, you'll find all sorts of weird concoctions that are done and left. I mean, I found loads of lighting feeder pillars where site temporaries have gone in, or they've done something to power up some site cabins, and they've left the job, walked away, nobody bothered open up the panel, and it's still a monstrosity. This wasn't one of mine. This was sent to me though, and I thought it was just a really good and weird example where somebody had to run 2 tails in parallel and then connect them in and have one single conductor brown going that way and another tail going that way.
Hang on. Have they used 2 singles of a lesser cross-sectional area?
What, like 16s to 25?
Yeah. And then a bigger one. That looks like a 35 mil on that
35,
one.
25 to 35.
And then that looks almost like a 16 or a 10, and then you've got possibly 2 16s down there.
Is that why they've done that? They've got
it's just a
parallel.
Could be all they had. They could have extended it, moved it around.
This is definitely not a DIY, Dave. This is a
It's just not pretty, is it?
No.
It's not.
So a couple of comments we've got here. We've had David saying it's under strain. So obviously, this connection is not fixed.
Taped up. Well done,
so
Eddie.
to me, that would be a C2 with an FI to look at the impact of that strain existing to see if there's a risk. But you guys are also mentioning your proximity to the panel, and that might escalate that to a C1. So,
Neil thinks that we're being slanderous. I haven't even started yet.
Okay, let's see what everyone else
for everyone watching on YouTube, by the way.
Here we go.
I don't think it matters here whether it's a C1 or a C2.
It needs it's again like the previous. It's going to be unsatisfactory until it's fixed. So this is again why I would feel we'll go C1. Then I'll just fix it. That's how we use it.
This is why I like these codes as opposed to the old ones.
It allows you to know your action, doesn't it?
C1. Just on that, Mr. Betteridge has said the earth bar looks weird. They are a standard earth bar. It's a drop link earth bar. You can use a tool, and it's just got a hook on it. You can disconnect the earthing conductor if you want to, and then you can connect your bonds, CPCs. Normally, crap that you get from hobby homes. If you go to one of the wholesalers or hobby homes or something like that, and you can ask them for an earth bar, they'll send you those monstrosities. Becoming not a fan of them. Just because they're exposed, the elements, corrosion, but we'll get onto that because we've got a couple. This is one of my favourites.
Oh, this one. Okay.
It's a classic because it's a perfect storm of external influences. It's just where do you start? There's nothing immediately dangerous there.
You can't give the whole thing a code because you've got to put a rule against it. So.
For me, I would. I'd see
external influences and FI because you'd need to check every piece of equipment. See.
Well, hang on, you can't FI everything.
Which was not.
You can't FI everything. You'll get loads of comments down below when this goes on YouTube. No, you're actually bang on.
It's getting warm. I think he's going to boil
No, you're right. It's a C3. For me, it's a C3, right. But it definitely needs some...
We need to investigate the impact of that C3.
How do you do that? And if you're asked, then please remedy it. Take it off the wall while we're fixing the wall. It's a big old job.
It's likely that this is going to end up in an FI because you might not have the time authorised to you to actually do a required inspection to see the impact of that corrosion. So it's a C3 FI from that image. But that FI is going to turn it probably into a number of C2s or C3s or even a C1.
I'd be fairly confident that I could put an FI on that and you're going to find some C2 content in there. I guarantee it.
Yeah. That corrosion is never just.
What does everyone say? What does do the poll on this? Because it's a good one to be honest. Because
I've got it going.
There's no immediate danger on this. I don't think anyone would say it's a C1, C2. But I definitely think this is where that duty of care to give a heads up to the asset owner.
I was at a place not long ago, and it wasn't too dissimilar to this, but you opened up the panel, you took the lid off, and the board had no back to it. You could see the wall. It corroded through the whole board. So
sounds
you
about
need
right.
You need to investigate.
This is why I was taught when I was an apprentice, you always, in commercial industrial installations, if you've got any form of porous wall, you mount shallow unistrut. Never forgot it, and I always insist upon it. I mean, I think on that one, you can see there's an angle iron frame in the background.
There is.
So,
Yeah.
and that's a London
This is
Underground
rotted.
thing. They use London. That's a London Underground switch room, by the way. It was. It's not anymore. It's been gotten rid of. But they used angle iron frame and mounted all the switchgear on it. But that had corroded to the point where you can see the English Electric switchgear. You can see actually the connection bolts onto the angle iron. That was the sacrificial part, but because it hadn't been inspected and managed and maintained and intervened, you could have saved yourself a lot of money by taking the angle iron apart and replacing it bit by bit. And that was kind of one of the reasons why they used this angle iron, because you could intervene if it had corroded and extend the life of the asset. But it had just creeped through and into the buzz bars, and the wall had degraded to the point where it was just pointless, and that's what you had. So what have we got on this one?
Neil's made a good comment here, based on the photo C3, but from his experience, because obviously he works with rail, a lot of the times the metalwork is used as CPC here with this age and legacy of board, and that will most likely put it up to a C2 from the image alone for him, because he's aware more of the actual use of this wiring system in this location.
So, on the flip side of that,
Yeah,
if it hasn't been maintained and it is posh rotten, well, it's not been maintained. So you start pulling those covers off, and there'll be all manner of horrors inside
There will
do
be.
you know what? Neil's actually bang on there, because on London Underground, all of the old cable management was the CPC, and they were painted blue.
Yeah,
that was the colour for all LV equipment.
So if you see that as enclosures, you think, oh yeah, let's look inside. If you
well,
see
you're
it
not
as
seeing many earth
CPCs,
wires, are you really?
yeah.
It's
Good
all
point.
earth together. It's all bolted together via the general mass of what it's connected to. But yeah, I'd say definitely, yeah, I think there's been some good comments there. What's the overall consensus?
We have got pretty much like we discussed there, FIs on this one.
Nice. See, there you go. It's amazing how the dynamics change when you go from domestic into commercial.
Yeah, unfortunately on the polling, we can't do two options. So I should imagine some of these FIs or C3s might be, together.
And I was taught that, I mean, Richard, there's definitely an argument and debate for not using two codes. But for me, I always, if I'd use two codes, it's to enhance the engineering judgment and the message I'm trying to put across to that client. I know some people think it's confusing, but again, it's how you communicate the message, in my personal opinion. What's your view on it?
I think you should use one code per observation, but then you are allowed to expand upon that in the comments section.
Could you role play? Go, if this happens, this.
Yeah.
If this happens, that.
FIs, or if you want to, I mean, they're all forms. So if you want to use two codes, fine, but you need to make sure that you explain each part of them. Don't just check a C, because you told people use two now, so they're going to nip off now and start putting C3 FI. Tell people why they've done that, and that's going to cause a major. So be clear: if a C3 is satisfactory, an FI is unsatisfactory. So if you're going to put those in, the report will now automatically be unsatisfactory.
So I've actually used this as a good example to explain where I used this before, and we said it was a C3 with an FI, but then we discussed about under the duty of care and electricity work regulations to enable a safe system of work, working on and around that. Can you genuinely say that you still have a safe system of work given the fragility of it? Then you look at provision and use of workplace equipment regulations, Health and Safety at Work Act. Are we allowing, yes, we have competent persons, but is that suitable and sufficient? Have we assessed the risk? And given the fact that that runs an operational railway, are we content to leave that there till it fails? No. So immediately you're telling the employer that there's a number of variables that go outside of 7671 that they need to address, and to manage safety, to manage their infrastructure, to manage their operations, to manage their revenue. And that's where 7671 kind of is just such at the bottom of the pile.
And the thing with FI is, I mean, obviously in the PRS, there's a 28-day period, isn't it, where we need to start actioning on the conclusion of one report before we have a period. But we don't have that anywhere else. And so a lot of people who do FIs will obviously sometimes leave empty or incomplete observations, and they won't be able to give their decision, which in this image, you want to look more, that's FI, but you want to say it needs to be improved. So people will feel they want to do two things in that sense.
I love this because Mr. Holmes has put a great comment. See-through in its own could mean it will be left. Must be an FI or higher. I quite like that comment.
Must be, yeah.
Eddie has said it's got stickers. They're Traflite engraved labels. They'll last longer than the switchgear. There's some good codes there. Question to Richard: moving forward, should we perhaps be imposing conditions where inspectors find really bad stuff, i.e., de-energize or fix? I'm going to put them.
No, we can't do that. There are all sorts of legal implications for that. If you go switching something off and that's a life safety system, you could cause a lot of problems.
That is the problem. You don't know.
You don't have control over it. You're there to inspect and give people an understanding of what they are. If you take your car in for MOT and they say, "Oh, sorry, mate, it's failed," well, can I have it back? No, I've locked it out the back until you repair it. You can't do that. So it's a you're never going to get that one through. And then the cold light of day is the gas industry allow it, but when there's a gas incident, they kill a lot of people in one go and cause mass devastation. If someone dies from electric shock, it's generally isolated single incidents. So we don't kill that many people, and when we do, they're usually individuals, single killings. If you want to go really cold about it, the gas explosion has a potential for massive death. So that's why gas engineers are allowed to go isolating stuff and switching it off.
You also just mentioned aura fire. So if you were seeing something that was thermally at fire risk and they would not allow you to turn it off, what would you do? Would you record it? What action would you advise? If we can see it's about to catch fire.
It's about to go catch fire, you got the client, and they said, "No, leave it on, we're doing this." Get some with a fire extinguisher in. Fair enough, I'm moving on. I've exercised my duty of care. I've told you that's a C1 fire risk. It's about to catch fire, but you want to leave it on because you've got 50 people in to do this particular exercise and you're prepared to run this equipment, devastation and fire risk to get this evolution that could be very costly to your business through. Fine, that's their take on it. They want to do that. If you just flick it off and a piece of machinery shuts down, and that piece of machinery then supplies a service to another piece of machinery that can't ever be shut down and has to run continually to just keep itself going. If you look at a plastics plant, the heaters that keep the plastic hot before it's injection molded never turned off. They keep them running New Year's Eve, Christmas. They never stop. They can't stop because if it stops,
I've worked in factories where they shut down for like 8 minutes or something. It takes 36 hours to get back into production,
and that's a lifetime. Yeah. So if something's on fire there or cooling down, and you just switch it off because you want to be diligent, you could cost them millions. They might be aware that that's doing that. You think, well, it's a calculated risk.
It's kind of like a two-way discussion. You need to get this information from the client to understand the risk of that, but they need to then understand and respect the advice you give. So, if you give a danger notification, they need to take that shit seriously. And then you collect evidence of that.
Yeah, danger notification. If they refuse to sign that acknowledge the form, well, you've all got phones, video. You've got phones, video.
So, Can I just say, if I found it and it was dangerous and it was in my company where I work, I'd be the first person throwing a switch. Dave, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Guidance on risk document. Yeah. Comply with legislation and codes, but be prepared to seek further improvements. We have ethical codes that require us to take reasonable steps to protect, the public and the safe. This is where the wiring regs hits a brick wall. It stops. When you're doing commercial industrial coding, it's so far at the back. This is the minimum that we've got to work out and use our engineering judgment. And in fairness, before you started that work, we should be having a conversation with the client and saying, what do you want us to do if we find something that is immediately dangerous? If we're not, are we starting off on the right foot? Now, quickly, because I want to move this on, I don't want this to be 3 hours. Everybody
code that. Getting close to that, Paul. It's going to be another epic. You'll have to do...
But this is just advice and guidance to those guys if they're doing commercial. Have that conversation at the start. Maybe write it into your agreed contract, your extent and limitations, etc.
Yeah.
If you find something,
Neil said this in the chat about
Oh, is he?
First of all, it says what if the client isn't competent to understand the risk from your perspective, and then he says it could be sorted by a properly drawn up agreement between the client and the contractor. You want to get this shit discussed at the beginning.
Totally. And the fact of the matter is you should approach it. The client isn't competent to understand the risk, and this is the one thing that I've had ever since I started doing work as a client, every single person that I have ever spoke to, when I talk about electrics, they go, but we discharge our duty of care to that person who's got that logo, because that's what they think.
It doesn't work like that.
That's, you and I both know, Richard, they think by employing an electrical contractor, the contractor will sort it out. But Neil's bang on right. All of this stuff needs to be thrashed out in writing at the start. Without a doubt.
Might be, I mean,
a misconception that if you carry out a report to the sector and sign it, it's on you. It's not. It's on the client. It's on the landlord.
Person ordering the work.
Once you've done it and you give it to the landlord, unless you've done something professionally negligent, and by that I mean, let's say you signed for some insulation resistance tests and said that they've been done, and they haven't. The cables have been chewed and they're knackered. They're a fire risk and someone dies. Then they're going to come after you professional indemnity, because that's professional negligence. They can't do you for that. But if you just do certain tests and you do all of that stuff, and they go, there you go, and then 2 years down the line or 6 months down the line, something happens, and it's deemed that the landlord hasn't adequately kept the installation, and he says, well, Joe Bloggs did the report 2 years ago, it's on him. The justice is going to go, no, 2 years ago you had an MOT done, and at that point in time it was okay. The legislature says that you're now be liable throughout, and that pans across all industries, all inspections.
Guys, we are massively going to be hitting 6 hours at this rate. Sean Mitchell has just said you would never be commercially viable as an average electrician. When I was on the tools, I never lost money because I learnt this stuff, I repeated it, and I didn't take no for an answer. And when a client became a brick wall, I became a bigger brick wall. I was a Rottweiler. I think there's some people who know me would know that. Clients think you're exaggerating to get risks, to get the money. Do the work, quote the legislation, copy it and give it to them.
Yeah. We said on the last webinar, take pictures.
Take pictures.
Because, things might change after the time you've even finished your report. You might take a few days to do your report nice and neatly. Things may have changed. Someone may no longer be working where they were when you saw them working there. They may have moved them along.
Dave, run the poll. So
as long as you get permission to take pictures, I understand sometimes that can't work. But yeah, let's go with this
panel. As you can see, through crimps, the old through crimp, red to blue there. I think it started out as very much loved and then just got.
This happens over time, though, with a lot of panels. You can see the original installation's pretty good. There was a great poster on Twitter today where, I can't remember what it was, there were two boards side by side, an old 3036 rewirable board, all nice and meticulously done. And I think next to it was a Hager or a BG board, which was a rush job. And you just looked at it and you went, oh, you could just see the difference in.
So this is obviously a lockable panel. It's in a secure room. So the only persons accessing this will be authorised persons. Probably over time.
I'm with Neil, I'm afraid. I know that it looks a bit scrappy, and they do like to use those yellow connectors, which may possibly be too big for some of those cables. But if it's locked and access only by skilled, I'm thinking C3.
That's all I thought when I saw this. I'd like to chuck some bits in.
Unless you point something out to me, because I can't see it.
I just looked at it as rough. To
you said it was locked and not accessible.
Locked. Yeah. It's locked. Yeah. It's not accessible to anyone other than skilled persons. I just saw it as just really freaking rough, to be honest with you. C3s. Right. Again, moving on, because we've got a few of the big ones to go through with the videos. So let me get this moved on. Right, this is an interesting one. So this was a distribution board. As you can see, it says sump pump.
Is it dripping?
It is dripping. And as you can see, it's corroding. Now, sump pump, obviously sumps, a low point where you have a pump controlling things. Now, that is, that's a sector board.
Sector?
It's sector, yeah. It's one of the old, I think it was cities used to do them.
No, that's Rexel sector.
Oh, is it Rexel?
Rexel.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure Rexel Sanic were sector.
Right. So straight away, I would actually say with an area like that, you're kind of heading into like complex installation, ATEX stuff, because some pumps can emit gases because obviously there's sewage and effluent and all other sorts of nasties. You can see that installation has been selected and erected suitable for the environment. There's water leakage. It's just a very damp, nasty place, to be perfectly frank. It's behind one door. What do we think?
C2.
C2 to me.
Yeah, it's a C2 to me.
Yeah,
I
mean, I would, assuming it's not like filling up with water, there's no corrosion making the conductors inside come into contact.
Those days, look.
Yeah. So unless I actually get to look inside and see the cables have corroded and have heated up due to corrosion and actually come off, but with just this image, I would see to it.
What does everyone think?
We have C2. Pretty much.
Yeah, good.
Just double check.
I'm fairly sure there are drips across the bottom where it's pooling up.
It's classic, isn't it?
Yeah, there are drips. Yeah.
If that's what it's on the outside, what's it like on the inside?
Well, yeah, you can see the little browning just above the MCBs where it's starting to corrode.
So this is another one. It's just you can see the wiring's pretty new. It's post 2004. It's just a dog's dinner, really.
Just a car wreck, really.
Yeah, it is a car wreck. There's floating Wagos on the right-hand side at the bottom of the board.
Was the trunking lid missing?
Trunking lid was missing.
Then,
Board cover was taken off for an inspection, but the trunking lid was missing.
Is this in an enclosed place, like a cupboard?
It's within a switch room.
Is the switch room strict authorization for authorized personnel, or is the cleaner crap in there as well?
It's again, it's not. I wouldn't say there was a robust control system because anybody could get a key to access it, as in any contractor or member of staff.
Okay. We see C2?
Yeah, C2.
C2. If there was a robust system to stop people being in there,
you'd C3.
But then I'd relax. But relaxing to C3, the issue is it sit there forever, never get done.
Yeah. The question is how robust is that system, and then you get into the area of trying to investigate that as well. Don't you?
The trouble with I don't know what happened, but years ago there was this big obsession with putting these huge looms of cable for spare to redress and re-terminate. And you never needed that much because within the life of installation, realistically, you're going to re-terminate it maybe 3 or 4 times, possibly, if the connections are not done right. You don't need like half a meter of extra slack on every cable.
I think sometimes people also thought, they put some slack in case it was moved around or moved about. But there's so much
setting
excess.
Out and dressing. I think is key to it. But so what's everyone said?
We're going C2.
C2, yeah, good one.
C2.
Next one. Rotten. Just totally rotten. Old, life expired. Oh, sorry, I don't know why that's my numbers.
Well, for me again, I think FI, because we just don't behind there and just got some circuits rust on.
Is this readily accessible to the public?
No. This is again locked away in the switch room. But again, not great external influences there. You can see it's old. It's the old C50s, 3871s.
Well, if I'm only able to access the front and not take the cover off, I'd FI so I could then further investigate any corrosion inside.
Inside.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing a visual, absolutely.
It looks like someone's tried to get the bottom left one off and busted.
It's like sheared off or something, isn't it?
Yeah. Screws have gone missing over the years. You could further investigate, and I think for the installation you would want to further investigate it. But for me, I would go with a C3 on it because
C3.
Yeah, does
that mean that you have concluded your observation of this at this point?
Looking at the age of the breaker, looking at the level of corrosion on the surface, just based on that, I would suggest that the asset is nearing the end of its life, and I would recommend improvement of it, i.e. replacement.
Okay. But you'd still take the cover off.
Extent and limitation. If my extent limitation included a full inspection test, yes, I would. Okay. But again, it depends on that extent limitation. If I was only doing visual,
be aware of if you start taking these off, just be aware. It's not a C1. Nothing live parts, and we're FI. I think it's a bit rusty. If you take these screws off and bust them, and you can't get them on. Can't get them back on again, you might turn around and say it was okay before you came and now you've made it a C1. So you might get invited to put it right. So a bit of a, maybe have a word with the client.
Just old. Yeah.
Yeah, if they don't move, then don't force it.
And again,
or do what I do. Get someone else to come in and do it.
Just on as well, again, as the inspector, it's what's the use? What are the two circuits? How important are they? What are they feeding? Is it something that's critical to run something? Is it something that's a safety system? What would that involve, and what's the extent? FIs, some C3s, some good judgments in that. Yeah,
majority are FIs, 55%, 38% have gone C3. That's pretty fair.
Yeah, I don't know why that's disappeared. Right, earthing. Few on earthing we've got here. Again, corrosion. Look at that. Lovely earth bar there. The dreaded insulating tape versus heat shrink. Missing a bit of Vaseline there, really. That is just really poor environmental conditions. Heavily corroded.
You see, we can go down there, is there continuity and all of that malarkey, but let's be fair, that's knackered.
This is where we see a little Richard Townsend box in the corner. It might be electrically continuous to 0.00, but be fair, it's knackered. It's true. It's true.
That needs to be replaced. If you see through it, sit there.
Again, you're probably doing this inspection assuming it's going to be safe for another 5 or 10 or 3 years. If it's,
C2, look at the corrosion on there. Look, I mean, how is the structural integrity of those lugs holding up? Are they going to start to break?
Well, the minute you undo that, it's going to fail.
Yeah, and let's remember.
I agree with Neil's comment. You should not code to a force work through which code risk versus likelihood. Totally agree. What's the likelihood of that failing at some point? What's connected to that? Is it imperative for safety and operations of the installation? Mm-hmm. Yes. Is there a high likelihood it's going to fail? Yeah. So it needs to get done at some point. And if you're the inspector, you're the diligence telling them it's going to fail.
And what you need to remember, specifically with earthing in particular, is when it does fail, it doesn't stop things operating other than maybe the ability of hiding indirect neutral currents, maybe
potentially.
Yeah, potentially. It doesn't. So people might not get that immediate acknowledgement that something has failed in their system. They may not seek assistance when it fails.
Let's code this and let's move on. For me,
we are pretty strong with C2 on this one.
Good. Yeah, totally agree.
94% C2.
And Neil C3'd it. Well done, Neil. I always knew you'd C3 that one.
Oh, what a trooper.
Well done, Neil.
Sorry, he's on here, so we're just going to throw him under the bus.
It's boring to be the same.
Yeah. In fairness, we do agree on 99% of our codes. So.
Oh, what did I do?
So again, it's a sub-main feed. Very good eye on the inspector. I got sent this.
There's just some cores not on it.
It's a separate CPC, which they've terminated. So they've run an armoured with a separate CPC, which isn't uncommon in a lot of places. Designers require a separate CPC. I wouldn't be glanding it like that. I would be using a stuff and gland and taking it directly to the earth bar and then having a fly lead off of the banjo on the inside. But that is the CPC for the circuit.
Well, if they calculated that as a CPC for the circuit and the cross-sectional area accordingly,
even though they've got it on the armoured, don't they?
Followed through with it.
Sorry, what?
If they've calculated and put an extra CPC,
yeah,
then we've calculated a given cross-sectional area.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a little bit awry at that.
Yeah, it's pants, to be honest with you. For me, I see to that.
You can go C2 because that's not lugged properly. You've got workmanship and all that. But you can also go FI because what's the required cross-sectional area for the circuit that was designed for?
Now, a lot of designers have for many years used separate CPCs, and it's always led to the debate over how you terminate. It's not really the way I would do it, as I previously said. But for me now, anything that's 3-phase, I use 5-core armoreds because I think they're far better. Just really, really easy to use and work on. But yeah, so right. Next one, I think this might be, this is a simple one. It's a very, very simple one. This is just a 3-phase board in a plant room. That is a lovely bar sticking out saying, touch me.
Touch me, touch me.
Touch me now.
Okay.
But then again, if
we are in a switch room, are we?
Yeah.
We are, yeah.
Okay.
And there is access to it. That says roller door. So
roller doors. I can't even read that bit there.
Can't quite read that.
But it's 2 3-phase circuits. So the 3-phase board is blanks missing. So what do we do? It's a very simple. What do we do for blanks missing? Now you do have control because it's within a room that competent or skilled persons should be accessing.
Can the cabinet be locked or anything like this? I mean, do we?
No, it's just a standard little twist lock. There's no key locks or anything on it.
But the room is locked.
Yeah, the room's locked. Yeah.
And again, I mean, is the authorization of this room, access to this room, strictly controlled?
Yeah.
So the only persons in front of there will be the electrician, not the guy doing another mediocre task in the room.
Yeah, and the electrician should know what to do with that.
Boxes on C2.
Yeah, if that's the scenario, you're at C2. If you have anyone else in that vicinity that is not immediately competent in understanding this risk, then you're C1.
Yeah,
that's my view. Both of them are unsatisfactory, though. So, okay.
I've actually seen people argue C3s on that, but
really,
yeah.
What's Neil for?
No, it's not Neil's. Sorry, it's not Neil's argument. It's just no. I've had somebody argue. So I don't know why that's disappearing. Apologies, that's not supposed to do that. But yeah. For me, it's C2 with the control measures.
That's it again. But you've got to if you're going to say it's a C2, you've got to just let your client know that you are assuming that they know and agree with you when you say this room is only used by these persons.
It's still unsatisfactory.
It's still unsatisfactory, but it's a case of just giving the client that understanding.
We're heading into the home straight now, so I wanted to raise up this other issue in the code breaker, which was another debated issue, which is the fire hoods on open back downlighters in ground floor ceilings with rooms above the C2s. There's been, I think, lots and lots of debates over this. I know this is a domestic one, but this can apply to commercial as well. And
this is about fire integrity, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's there's a LABC table which gives you different floor levels. And
is that one of the approved documents?
Yeah, one of the. I can't remember where it is now. It's in one of them. And it
fire's B, isn't it?
The table, it's a table. It says this can be there, and that can be there, and this can be there, and that can be there, and it says what can be fire rated and what's got to have a hood on it and various pieces. So that's how we populated that. And I checked it when I saw it going on the forum to make sure we hadn't got one of them wrong, and it still pans out. The only catch is that you can get now, bear in mind this book was printed a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Now you can get a downlighter that looks like it's not fire rated. Okay, so it looks like just an.
So it's an open luminaire, not
an open luminaire, no hood, no nothing. And it's the manufacturer said it's fire rated. And it's fire rated because there's an intermittent seal and a black glass underneath.
Gotcha.
And apparently, the way that the fire rates work, that's the part that's the fire barrier. Okay. Your problem here is you've used the words open back downlight. Yeah. If
you said non-fire rated downlight.
Yeah, it's a play on words. That was all.
Yeah.
So
that's the problem with that.
The book will evolve, and we'll iron that out in the next edition. It's okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree with the codes. If you've got habitable space above, it's more. It's got to be
keep the person above safe from the person below.
Yeah, that's been known since Part P came through, where we started actually paying attention to the rest of the building regulations. But yeah, that's always been there. If there's a habitable space above,
this is a start for 10. So since this came out, a manufacturer has produced something, seen a loophole, and thought, that's not a big can on the bottom. I'll just put this piece of glass in.
Can I just chip in on the comments? Stanners, I'd love to know the real name, or maybe that's his surname. Apologies if it is. A house is one fire compartment. Why fire rated? So start off with. The term fire rated has many, many definitions because it's fire resistant, fire rated, fireproof. That opens up an entire debate.
Time that you got 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or whatever. And we picked those out of a local area building control, or I can't remember where it is now. I'll send it to you when I get it, but that's where it came from. Regardless of whether, yes, a house is one compartment, but then you've got floors within that. And then you're also looking at sound transmission and stuff like that. So
yeah, I'll just quickly scan through approved document B.
Richard, can you turn your mic up a little bit, please? Because I think people are struggling to hear you. Yeah. Sorry, we started this a little bit late, so we probably didn't tune in our mics, but that good. Okay, so that we're gonna look at this now. This is a little bit of a storybook one here. So this is a Schneider board, and as you can see, there's been a rather large bang. So this was caused by a 1 megawatt solar array on a shopping centre. So straight away, this is more just of a. These are the sort of things you can find when you're doing an inspection. Now, this is a true story. This happened to the inspector while he was there. Okay, so I'm not going to ask you to code this. This is just a little bit of a. This is how dangerous in commercial inspection and testing can be. So that board, as you can see, is pretty cooked from the bang that's occurred. So I'll go to the next slide.
This is why I wear arc flash stuff.
And now I want you guys. So on the right-hand side of the picture is the AC supplies from the output of the inverters. So the strings go into the inverter, convert from DC to AC. They then come out in these rather large, I think there were 70 mils. And to the left-hand side, as you can probably see, is some rather smaller sized cables. Now, the cables on the right are the ones that come from outside by the installation contractor. The panels there are, the cables on the left are the ones built by the panel manufacturer. Can you start to see a problem, everybody? Hopefully you can. And this is what happens. And it's one of Dave's favourites. It's that grouping.
That thing that everyone says never actually happens.
So what actually happened was the inspector was opening up the panel, and he basically saw that the trunking. I'm hoping it's on the next picture here. Actually, there you go. So he opened it up, and this is what he found. He found that the comb trunking was completely warped. And he was trying to understand why. Now, it's fairly evident from the way it's warped, there is a presence of thermal effects on the cabling. If we go back, we can see that the cabling on the right-hand side, we're looking at 70s and 95 mils, were joined onto 6s, 10s, 16s at max. They were then bunched and grouped and coiled into this comb trunking, which was never good, never really going to be able to stand it. They then got so hot, they started to melt together. This chap, when he opened up the lid of the comb trunking, that blew up while he was taking the lid off. So his movement exposed that. Luckily, the chap was absolutely fine, but that literally blew up, and that was a 1 megawatt array. Okay, and that circuit there, as you can see from the copper. So we've got to be very, very careful when we're inspecting. We start pulling lids off of pre-made panels, etc. So it's more a bit of a lesson learned, because that's a recent incident, which I think is quite a good incident, really, to kind of remind inspectors, when you are doing your inspection, you do your inspection. When you're then starting to probe more, just be very careful if you're working on or near live systems.
I'm conscious of the time, gents.
Yes. Right, last one.
Yeah.
It's a school.
Just to mention, let's play.
So as you can see, it's a table with gas pipes, and that's what you've got there. You've got a little sink, you've got some twin and earth going to the sockets, and that's what you've got. That's your installation. You've got gas, electric, water, drainage, twin and earth. It's in a cupboard, accessible to anyone, as you can see.
What's the back of that socket? How is that? Is that like a dry line box, or?
It's a dry line box, yeah. But it's not good workmanship materials, so straight away 13111.
Well, there's no cable. The cable. There's no. That cable's not supported throughout its length.
Oh, it's not. It's accessible to anybody, which was mind blowing in itself, because that is a school. It's not great.
Let's get a poll going on this one. Let's code this one. Get the poll going.
Oh, that's C2 for me.
Yeah, it's C2 for me as well.
And just while guys are polling, when we talked briefly about fire barriers, luminaires above, if you download approved document B, which is obviously, and you can download the dwellings document, sections B2 and B3 is about structure of linings and about fire integrity of the linings and the structure. And in there, you'll talk about internal spread of fires and the requirements.
Okay, so this is the last one. Richard, talk us through this, and I'll just skim along.
That last one was C2, by the way. C2 for that last
100%,
observation.
100%, everyone. Well done. Bang on.
Okay, contractor. This is a leisure facility, a big fitness suite. So there are big machines and people wandering around all over the place. This door, sort of, I think, I can't remember if it slides or it closes shut. This wooden door there, and then they usually fill this with all manner of crap that they have as fitness people in those places do. And this is how it's left. So contractors left a couple of weeks previously. So the lid's on the bottom of the floor there. It's been reused. This is a modernisation thing. And you can see the lid on that consumer unit. It's not fitting flush. It's not fitting flush because one of the circuits that they fitted goes from the top of the board to the bottom and it just goes straight across. So it's actually stopping it. And that's the reason the lid is on the deck. That's the hinge there, and they butted it so close to the wall, you now can't get the lid on. You can't get the lid
So
on.
Silly.
So even though the lid is off, the actual thing can't go on.
No, you can't get it on. You can't get the lid on because you've got to open them, slide them on to peel them round. You can't do that.
So this is what it looks like up close. You can see nothing's in alignment. Should we go to the next slide so we can see what's inside? Because it's a little bit of a storybook
It's
one.
even more fun.
It's inside. You can see it's a bit of a dog's dinner inside.
So these weren't connected and pushed in because they've got all sorts of cables in the way of them that they put in, and you can't physically get it back because it's blocked. These twin and earths, by the way, they were what were putting across it, stopping it from closing. You can see some cut marks in there where they.
Yeah. So there's already sign of damage from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great. I would suggest that persons who weren't skilled or competent were working on that.
Okay, so is this immediately dangerous, potentially dangerous, just improve?
There's a few different. You've got to get the bigger picture of the install. Install?
Where did they get the cable colours from?
I'm assuming this is an armoured cable.
Right, okay. Three-phase, yeah, they've used old three-phase.
So they're a different colour, but they're not marked by number. Or
What about them then?
they've not been identified, have they? They're just yellow.
But they've used blue as the line conductor on this picture.
Okay, those are the lights for that area.
Wow.
And the excuse was we didn't have any brown singles, just used the blue singles. And when you drop the light fronts off to have a look inside, it was just a big sea of blue. Neutral,
Okay.
lives, switch lives, no marking for switch live or live, just all blue.
So there was just colour. There was no other alphanumeric markings.
No, nothing.
Oh well, there you go.
No
Okay,
cables.
yeah. I mean, that's just horse shit, really.
Right, come on then. Let's go.
Let's see what we've got.
One. Take it on.
We've got 52% went with a C1.
Yeah. We've got C1s for the board.
The board.
You can get your fingers and your mitts in there. C2 for me, the maps and neutrals inside there, potential for danger because you don't really know what you've.
Again, yeah, I mean it's potentially dangerous because fundamentally the person doing that work should go, that ain't right, before they actually.
No, they knew. He knew. He said,
He
said, oh, didn't have any brown cable left, mate. I said, you've been on site 2 weeks. What, you couldn't go to the wholesalers in 2 weeks? It was just...
Wow.
It's a mess. Yeah, no, I think there's some good coaching in that. It's a collection of stuff.
That's a cool little collection, that is.
That's it.
All right. Let me just double check to see if there's any questions. I don't think there was actually nothing coming up in the Q&A, which is good.
Different mindsets, some different responses to that.
Oh, well, some were dismissed because we've answered them. All right.
Someone said Square D, it's not a C1 if they're missing because obviously they're the bus bars you click into. But we've got great holes, but the terminals you put the cables into the other end, they're on show. So
can I just highlight one thing, which was a comment from Sean, which was, if I go back to the school, which was that one there, he said, surely there are standards that cover this. There is. So schools are covered by BS 4163, which is Health and Safety for Design and Technology in Education and Similar Establishments Code of Practice. And it's basically an electrical installation standard for schools. But again, this is why we always say work from the regs, because there is other standards that we need to be considering. There will also be local authority, or if that's that school, the body that owns it may have their own building services.
I had I did an inspection long ago, and I had to dig up BS. Hang on, I wrote it down. 6396 is equipment, sockets. These little pop-up sockets you get on a plug top. Yeah. So you go to a site, you've got sockets, and then you've got plugs feeding sockets in furniture.
Yes, which is a special location.
I had to dig that one out. So sometimes we will go beyond. What a headache that is.
So do we have any questions? I know it's gone long, but not.
Let's have a look. Some thanks. Top webinar, thank you. Some chaps. Cheers webinar. Good. We enjoyed it. All right. You can all just say thanks and go if you want. Then we can go. Any questions?
And we'll be back next week with industrial. Hopefully, it will be Mr. Skirm or a replacement if Mr. Skirm can't do it.
No. We discussed this. Obviously, we've got Amendment 2 around the corner.
Have we?
So preparation will be updated. So I've always said it's an evolving book, and I've always said that I'll listen to what people say, and that's always been all the way from the go-get. So if we are going to upgrade this book, then maybe we can take some advice from those on the floor, if that's their want, and we'll give it a few tweaks next time around.
So you heard it here first, chaps.
Okay, well, maybe when you're getting to that point, Richard, where you guys are going to start reapproaching it, we can do a couple of webinars with you guys and get the guys on the floor to throw some stuff in.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you next Wednesday for more shenanigans, and I promise you it will be under 2 hours.
Okay. Cheers, Richard. Thanks for coming in so late.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, no worries, mate. Thanks a lot.